Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Lou, how's it going?
I am well. Thank you for setup there, Annie and Kadir. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I was getting a little bit of an echo there for a second, but it looks like we're all clear. Well, excited to be doing this. So it looks like you got some snow back there. You want to let the team know where you're dialing in from?
Yeah, for sure. So I am in Park City, Utah. I think an area of the country, much like other parts of the country, that has been hammered by snow the last 48 hours. So yeah, we've gotten about 1.5 feet of snow since 9 p.m. last night. But infrastructure here is pretty well set up for it. So it's all good. I'm actually sort of pinch hitting a little bit here for one of my colleagues, Whitney Magnuson, who's our global head of social, who's based in Dallas and has been without power for the last 24 hours. So I feel lucky to sort of be in the scenario I'm in, but definitely a shout out to everybody in other parts of the country who are dealing with the power outages that seem to be hitting a lot of places.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation out there in Texas right now, but appreciate you jumping in here, and hopefully everyone gets their power back soon, gets back on the grid, and hopefully after this you'll be able to go out there and enjoy the snow a little bit.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Well, thank you. So I guess for a little background on you, so as director of editorial content at Hilton, it'd be great to hear a little bit about what that role really entails. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing there.
Sure, happy to. So I joined Hilton about 3 years ago. My background is in traditional media and journalism. So spent about 11 years in New York in magazines, broadcast journalism, as well as online operations. And much like a lot of other organizations who've sort of invested and doubled down on content in the last couple of years, joined Hilton in 2018, just before our 100th anniversary as a company, to really invest in owning our story, right? And kind of owning our narrative in a way that I think a lot of the brand marketers that are on this call will understand, and doing so in a really smart way. So we are a huge organization. I don't have to tell a lot of people what Hilton is, which is always a good problem to not have. But I think that we as a company have evolved a lot over time too. We now operate over 6,300 hotels in 119 plus countries around the world. And so, from 100 years ago, operating one small hotel in Cisco, Texas, anyone in Cisco who's on here, God bless you. No, Cisco is a great place. But yeah, we've evolved a lot as a company. And so really investing in kind of what our story is and doing it across platforms, working really closely with the hotels individually, with our social channels. When Whitney started at the company, we started around the same time. We had about 30,000 social channels from the different hotels. And so I think the folks on this call can probably realize that the challenges and kind of keeping that engine moving in the right direction while being smart about what we do. And then, so we've had a lot of really good success over the last couple of years. Obviously, the last year has been a tough one for us, as it has for anyone on this call in the hospitality or travel industry. Nobody could have foreseen this coming, and nobody could have foreseen this lasting as long as it has, particularly as it impacts our folks. I think nobody more so than our frontline hotel workers, who really have been at it from the beginning, working longer hours, less people, all the sort of things to sort of make sure that the guest experience is great amid a crazy time. But we've made some great progress, and happy to chat a little bit today about some of what those are and some of what we're looking at as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to be having this conversation with you and with everyone in the audience today, because obviously I think we all have an appreciation for content. Every one of us on here believes content is the path for every brand. But I think now more so than ever, especially over the past year, I feel like as brand marketers, there's a greater sense of responsibility for the content and the story that you're telling. Can you speak a little bit about how the role of content has changed in the travel industry at large over the past year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it even goes back beyond the past year, but I'm happy to dig a little bit into how we got there. So I think travel companies, much like all the other companies probably represented on here have recognized for a while now that it's no longer enough to just be in business doing what you do, right? You have to stand for something organizationally. You've got to talk about what you're doing to make the world a better place. And I think all of that, kind of brings consumer trust and advocacy in ways that traditionally just selling doesn't, right? And I think that that's where content has such an immense power to bring consumers into your life cycle in ways that you maybe never thought about 5 or 10 years ago. So I think that we had done a lot of institutional work even pre-pandemic to kind of start building that, particularly around our sustainability platform. We've got a program called Travel with Purpose that we launched really at the beginning of I think it was 2013 or 2011, sorry, but was really kind of out ahead of the industry as we think about how we make the world a better place through travel, which was ultimately one of our visions from our founder, Conrad Hilton, back in 1919. So it all kind of comes full circle. I think as the pandemic hit, there were a few phases, right? I think that we really looked at. I think the first of which was we need to, make sure everybody's safe and make sure that everybody has what they need at the hotel level, at the guest level, to kind of make sure that their travel experience is safe. And so we did a lot, particularly our government relations team did a lot with kind of lobbying to Congress and kind of getting hotel workers covered under a lot of those early bills. We organizationally invested in a program, which Kadir, you and I talked about, that I don't know, 5 years ago probably would have seemed completely absurd, right? But Hilton partnered with Lysol and the Mayo Clinic on a cleanliness program for all of our hotels around the world that we call Clean Stay, which really is nothing new. We've always had a huge cleanliness practice as a part of our hotels, but making it more forward facing and making it almost like, to your point, a content play to a degree to tell the story of how we clean our hotels. That's something that, again, I don't know that a lot of people pre-pandemic would have thought was an angle or a story that was of interest to people, but particularly as people started to get out and travel again, was a hugely important part of making them feel safe on that journey, right? And letting them know that, through Clean Stay and through the program and through the work we did with Mayo and with Lysol, we were making sure that travel experience was as seamless and as simple and clean and safe as possible. So that was an early example. I think the other piece we lean really heavily into, while people are not traveling, we still have a global brand that people have great affinity towards. And let's bring some of that travel experience at the hotels into their living rooms, right? So, Kadir, you've got like a beautiful background there. I can't tell if they're real books or wallpaper, to be frank with you. Is wallpaper?
Yeah.
Yeah, but tapping into that idea that we had so many beautiful locations and destinations that we could, kind of utilize as desktop backdrops and things like that. As people really got into that phase, ideas of how do we bring great recipes from around the world so you can almost travel the world through cooking or drinks or whatever your kind of mentality is. So we tried a lot of different things and we've seen some really good successes over time to kind of keep brand awareness high. Whilst people are not out traveling as much as they would have in past years.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I think as you talk about some of the different content that you guys were experimenting with and testing different things out, for me, all of that starts to point towards testing equals data, right? And we're looking to see what's working. How do you, from where you sit, identify what's successful? What are you looking at? What are some of the metrics you're looking at? What's some of the data that you guys look at to understand success?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not terribly different than it was pre-pandemic, but I think really with a smaller team, we had a significant amount of layoffs at Hilton, much like other hospitality companies during the pandemic. We've had to be smarter with our resources. And so I think that's where data and insights certainly play a role. We work really closely with our social team around even just identifying stories that we should be pursuing, right? So I think that's a big part of that early social listening funnel as we think about that aspect of it, things that may be bubbling up that we should be paying attention to, or maybe are a trend that might be worth our time. But then I would say, defining success metrics before we really partake on any kind of initiatives is a big part of it. I think that a lot of companies who've invested in the content space, that's one of the big learnings probably early on is you can create lots of great content, but if you haven't defined sort of what the success is going to be at the end of it, you don't actually know if it was successful, right? To your point. So for us, I think, the last year, particularly since that's really where we're focusing, it's been an awareness play. I think getting as many people aware of some of the programs and initiatives that we've launched as possible. We're doing it without paid media dollars. I want to be completely honest with you guys that it's a weird time. And as you all know, as marketers, marketing without paid media is really, really tough. So I think that we've had to find creative and unique ways to break through with really great content and newsworthy content that kind of puts us in a different sphere of recognition. I think one example that sticks out to me, we decided, again, somewhat early on in the pandemic to officially release for the first time ever the DoubleTree cookie recipe, which if you guys have stayed at DoubleTree hotels was, it's one of those like really amazing, warm, comforting parts of just checking into a hotel. You get this delicious chocolate chip cookie. I had no idea when I joined Hilton, but it had been replicated and copied incorrectly many times on the internet, but without ever really releasing the proper recipe. So we saw it as a chance while there was a huge baking surge in all over the country. I think this was in the midst of the sourdough craze, and as people were running out of flour on store shelves, to sort of jump into that moment and do something that was super simple, but at the end of the day, drove really great brand awareness for DoubleTree and for our hotels. It was one of the most popular things we've done in 10 years as a company. And we did all of that without paid media. For anyone who's super curious, you can check out the recipe. It's on our websites now. The secret ingredient, which not what I would have guessed, is lemon juice. So I think what blew us away was just the amount of interest that, in a time of lockdown, this was on CNN, it was on BuzzFeed, it was on every news outlet that you can think of, because at the end of the day, it hit something that we were all going through, right? Was, how can we connect better as people and do things that I think ultimately bring us closer together while we're all stuck apart. And so for us, the metrics and the analytics sides, to go back to the original question, it's really measuring success before we start on a project. And then I think coming back around on the back side of it, it's looking at what did we achieve by doing this, and learning for the future that really influences how we look at data and insights.
Yeah, that's great. I love that DoubleTree story. I just remember at the start of the pandemic, a lot of restaurants and hotels and different groups were releasing different recipes that you didn't realize had this fandom behind them, which, to your point, the DoubleTree cookie recipe, whoever would have thought that was a thing that would take off like that. When I think of things like that, I think of what are some of the catalysts that help get some of those stories out there. And for me, for my background, for where I work, obviously the influencer world is one that is always top of mind. Travel influencers and travel vloggers had a huge, I wouldn't necessarily call it a boom, but they were taken off over the past several years, literally and metaphorically. And I know they were a valuable marketing channel for a lot of companies in the hospitality industry and travel and leisure industry. Can you speak a little bit about the relationship that your team has with influencers and how that dynamic may have evolved in the past few years?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is where I will say Whitney's probably way better at talking about some of this stuff than I am, but I'm happy to give you as best an answer as I can. So influencers, especially on the travel side, have been a huge part of our business for a long time, right? Whether we're talking about working with them from a PR perspective, and kind of the sort of things that we need to do to kind of promote a hotel and get things out there. We've worked with influencers on marketing campaigns too. We did something a little bit higher level influencer, I suppose, to your point, with Rosario Dawson to promote Puerto Rico and tourism there following the hurricane about 2 years ago. So I think that influencers and travel influencers in particular, to your point, they've been a big part of our business for a long time. I think as the world went into lockdown, it obviously had a huge impact on what travel influencers were able to do. And frankly, the inability to travel makes it hard to be a travel influencer. So I think that, they've had to be creative. We've had to be creative as well in the way that we work with them. Again, without paid media dollars, as I mentioned earlier, because it's been a big part of our cut to sort of the pandemic spending, is getting smarter about who we work with and how we work with them, right? I think that, interestingly, as we've seen like the trends in like travel shaming that kind of have come along through people who are doing like solo travel and things like that, I think leaning more into like family-friendly road trips and things like that are less about getting on a plane and going, across the country or to a different country even. It's changed what the sort of travel influencer content cycle looks like, right? I mean, I think there's a lot more people who are doing those 2-hour, 3-hour road trips and talking about, what it's like to do that in this time of COVID. I think they've also been really good for us, as I talked about the Clean Stay program, at kind of being advocates for that, right? So, we have a very physical, visible, version of Clean Stay in our hotels. When you walk into the lobby, you see signage everywhere that talks about it. When you get to your room, you actually have a seal, like a seal on your door that has to be broken, that shows you that the room has been cleaned and secured before you got there. And so, the amount of social content that we've gotten, I would say even organically, not even through sourcing with influencers, right? Just to kind of showcase, hey, this is really great, Hilton. Thank you for kind of taking the extra step to invest in this. Like, that's been huge for us. And then it's finding ways to amplify that, right? So, yeah, influencers, and I think they're coming back around in some regard. I mean, I think that we've seen some pockets of folks who are traveling again. We want to do it thoughtfully. We want to make sure that people are traveling safely and at the right time. So it's going to be an ongoing situation that we monitor as we kind of move forward as to how we best engage with influencers and what that kind of cycle looks like.
Yep. You talk about travel shaming a little bit, and we discussed this earlier with the To New Memories program and travel memory deficit. I think everyone universally believes that travel is going to come back, and it's going to come back strong and hard and very soon. At least everyone on this call, most likely. Can you speak a little bit about the campaign you guys launched in the fall and the insights that drove that, and a little bit about what travel memory deficit is?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, I think everybody would like for it to come back as soon as possible, right? Because not only is it a livelihood, but we all like genuinely love and miss travel. So yeah, we actually shot a commercial, which is, as you and I talked about, Kador, very interesting in a time like this. With production, logistics, and travel and all that sort of stuff. We shot something in LA with remote Zoom production. We had one person on site and the rest of us sort of managing. But really the idea, to your point, the travel memory deficit, and we did a concurrent survey to that commercial that kind of revealed really the idea that travel is so core and central to so many great memories in people's lives, right? So the travel itself is obviously a huge part of that, whether you've gone on a trip to, an incredible destination that you'd always wanted to, or, sought out your roots, or gone on an incredible food tour in Italy, or whatever it might be, right? But there's also all these life moments that happen, right? So, little things like, your daughter jumping in the pool for the first time, right? Which is a huge moment, that you maybe are not able to experience if you don't have a pool at home. Getting in a convertible and driving up the highway and checking into a hotel because it was a rental. Like, if you are not traveling, you're not doing that, right? And so those little memories that can be small moments, right? I think that's one of the things we societally have recognized, like, we can't take for granted during all of this. Is those small moments of joy can be such a huge part of what makes us happy as people. And so many of those were centered around travel. And so, yeah, we found that 9 in 10 people, basically were desperately missing, the memories that they make when they travel. The ability to not just be a person sharing a living room table or a kitchen table that now doubles as an office, but actually, spending time with your family in joyous occasions, is something that travel brings, whether it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something that you might have enjoyed in a particular location. Like, that's a big part of what travel is. And so, yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's a campaign that we will continue to lean into as the resurgence in travel comes back, hopefully. But this idea that travel can be the great enabler to normalcy, right? I think for us, we see it as a chance to, whenever you're ready, right? If it's driving 2 hours away from home and staying at a Hampton Inn just because it's a reason to get away for the weekend, that's a step, right? That's a big step for people who've been locked down for a year, all the way to the level of like, getting on a plane and going internationally, which we all want to do, again in the near future. It's going to take some time to get there, but we've got to be a trusted partner and enabler as we kind of think about those travel memories and help people make them again, because that's honestly what we found through the research, was that people want to get out and make those memories. They just want to do it safely when the time is right.
Yeah. One of the stats that jumped out to me when I was looking at the release you shared was 66% of travelers don't want to put off their bucket list travels anymore, which is kind of like an uncomfortable acknowledgement of our mortality, right? Where it's like, I got to do this now. I can't keep putting things off because who knows when something like this is going to hit again. It's a little crazy, but it's also great to see that so many people are eager to get back out there and travel. I know I personally am.
No, that's huge, right? I think people need to see the light at the end of the tunnel, for lack of a better way to put it, right? And I think that if you've been putting off that bucket list trip for a long time, this has probably recentered you and made you say, maybe I should just do this, right? And I think you're going to see a lot of that. Life is short, as a lot of us have unfortunately, come to recognize in the past year, if you've been impacted by COVID or your family or friends have. And, I think making the most of those moments with friends and with family and going to places that you want to see, like, you've got to take advantage of those opportunities while you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'd say as much as we look at some of the challenges and the negatives that came from the pandemic, I think there have been some interesting innovations and positives that have come out of this. And I think like learning how to be able to work creatively, remotely, the way that you were talking about doing Zoom productions, as much as we love to travel and be on site for productions and be on location, I think we can now see that it can be done differently. Do you see that as something that could potentially become more of a longer term trend in your side of the business, as far as not having to travel to productions anymore, and how this is going to start changing the content landscape, the production landscape?
So I think this had been happening for a while before the pandemic, right? The ability to do a lot more remotely. I think this obviously accelerated it in a way that none of us kind of foresaw coming. So I think, to answer your question, there will be parts that stick around, is my guess, and there will be parts that come back. I think that, there is something that there's a lot, frankly, that you cannot replicate without being there in person, right? I think particularly, on larger productions and things that are a little more involved, it's really difficult, as a lot of people probably can recognize here, to pull that off virtually and digitally. I think that, we probably will see sort of a course correction on some of the smaller stuff, maybe, where, things that maybe were nice to have kind of pre-pandemic, where, you didn't have to travel, but it might make it a little easier. You might see some of those that kind of go back into this kind of fully virtual world. But I think it will be different per business and per kind of, initiative that you're rolling out. So ultimately, I think to do proper storytelling and production, I think you need to be able to go on site and do that sort of work. And, while I can hire a producer remotely and have them help me, it doesn't really replace the, innate knowledge that an internal person would have of what we're looking for, right? And so sometimes it's doubling the work for you by having to translate kind of what you're looking for. So I think you'll see some things that'll continue to evolve. And I think, I actually think some of these virtual meetings and things like that has probably evolved the thinking of, how we pull off events. I love what Brand Innovators does, and they've done a great job through the course of this year, evolving their thinking to be more than just an in-person kind of summit, right? Which I think that's not going away. Zoom is a real thing. Microsoft Teams for us is our shop, so I'll give them a shout out. But people are going to be doing virtual chats in some format for a long time now, in a way that they didn't pre-pandemic. So I think it'll be a balance, and I think that everybody's gonna have to figure out what works best for them and for their business.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see how this starts to change the way we travel for business as well, and the impact that it has on meetings. And we were talking about the amount of times you used to get on a plane historically versus I haven't been on a plane yet this year. I know you've been on two, so it's I'm eager to get back on there and start racking up my miles again. So I'm curious to jump into some of the different content platforms that are out there right now. So like you've got your customers are consuming content in dozens of channels at this point. How do you determine what are the channels that you need to lean into, and how do you manage all these different channels that you need to produce content for?
Yeah, well, I think it's a relevant conversation. I was on a few calls last week where everybody was freaking out about Clubhouse, right? So, I think that new platforms will always emerge, right? And this is not new. I've been doing this a long time. Kader, you've been doing this quite a long time too. I think that there are cycles in the sort of platform initiatives that kind of go through. And so I think you need to think about where your customers are and what you're trying to kind of perceive as a company. I think that, I laugh when I see a lot of the folks talking about, do you have a Clubhouse strategy right now, right? There's not really scale. There's not really, any kind of like insider analytics into what that actually means yet. And so, I think that finding where your folks are actually the most valuable is to me the best way to think about platforms. So we take a platform approach here. We've got quite a few own channels that we utilize. So we've got a couple of different Hilton online blogs and things like that we really tap into. Our social channels through Whitney's team and her leadership over the last couple of years have evolved immensely. Something we actually launched during the pandemic that has done incredibly well for us was a much larger Pinterest presence, which if you are on Pinterest, you understand why. Like, travel is a huge part of the pin process. But I think that kind of meeting people, like I said earlier, where they are in the pandemic and letting them help plan things, even if they can't do them, that's a huge part of Pinterest, right? And so we've seen really great growth on that in the first, I think, like 8 or 9 months that we've really been live there. So I think that really it's figuring out the right channel and the right audience for what you're trying to do. It's not always going to be the same, right? I think that different content lends itself better to different channels, and different initiatives really lend themselves better to different channels as well. So I think that finding where things make the most sense and creating against that is really the approach that we take. So, not trying to take I'll use an example, like a horizontal video file and reformat it for vertical, because it never works, right? Like, if you haven't shot it properly, is a super simple example, but as like the vertical nature of production and broadcast have kind of shown us, like, if you shoot with 9:16 and 16:9 in mind at the same time, when you're creating it in the run up, it actually makes it a heck of a lot easier to recut that for social purposes. So I think that, we think about audiences, and we've got some big channels and big audiences, not to mention, like I said, the individual hotel channels, which, number a significant amount around the world. They all have their own brand loyalists in their own right, beyond, sort of the corporate enterprise and the brands that we have on the corporate side. So, so I think it's working really closely in partner with our social teams and with our distribution team and our media team to figure out what is the right channel at the right time for this content.
Is there a channel that you found yourselves investing in more heavily in the last, call it, year, or that you see yourselves leaning into more outside of obviously Pinterest here in the coming year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so Pinterest is the big one, I would say, that didn't exist a year ago for us. That yes, we've invested in. Again, without paid media, a little bit difficult to sort of get too deep into some of these. I think that we have done quite a bit of work from a kind of platforming perspective and breaking out sort of short form videos, things that a lot of folks would probably recognize as things like Canva, things like that, to kind of roll out across platforms. We've worked really close in partner with a lot of different teams around the world to kind of recognize how do we create things for that variety of audiences. We have a really unique set of people. You talk about building up your airline miles. We've got 100 million plus Hilton Honors members who are, brand loyalists in their own right. They stay at our hotels, they get our discounts, et cetera, et cetera. But we started actually during the pandemic investing in email as a way in which to distribute content to those folks. And so have seen really good success both in America and in our Europe, Middle East, Africa region around, just giving people that sort of wanderlust style kind of travel content through email, because that's how so many people consume content these days, which had not really been a platform which we'd engaged too much in, but has done really well for us over the course of the past 9 months. So I think you'll see a lot more of that from us as well across regions. But again, investing in the right content for the right platforms is I think going to be the key as we move forward.
Right. Well, thank you for that. This has been great. I think it looks like we've got a couple questions in here. So Annie, what is the biggest surprise or biggest learning in the last year?
Biggest surprise or biggest learning? Man, I think one of the things we talked about earlier, Kadir, is we've recognized through this, it is a big world, but we're all very connected, right? And so we were very much ahead of the pandemic in the regards that I was working with our team in China and Asia as this really hit and onset last January. And so I think that taking like global learnings from them really helped us early on in this project or in this time that we're in as well to figure out how do we address this from a global perspective. So I think it's a big world. We've got a lot of different diverse, disparate kind of societies around us that happen, but taking learnings from all those different places and applying them, that's one of the learnings. I think that biggest surprise, I would say, honestly, the biggest surprise for us has just been how long this has gone on for, if I'm being honest. I think that, early on in the pandemic, a lot of folks talked about this being a couple of weeks or maybe a month or, whatever it might be. So I think that the biggest surprise is one, that everybody's been so adaptable to the environment in which we live. People have made it, as long as they have without traveling, which I think will actually open us up to a great resurgence in travel once you're able to do it again. So I think, people are innately connected by those memories that we talked about earlier. And so I think that will be a big part as we move forward of how travel is seen as an industry, but also just as consumers. And Annie, good to see you. Pop back in.
Hi, guys.
Before Annie cuts us off, one last question I had for you, Lou, is what's going to be the first place you want to go travel when everything opens up again? You feel comfortable traveling?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a great question. I ask this of a lot of folks often, and I've changed my answer a few times. So one of the last places I was there a day before the country locked down, was in Peru before the pandemic. And I feel as though it was a place that I didn't get to see in its full potential, right? So I'd love to go back there. We actually had to cancel a trip to Machu Picchu so we could get on a plane to get out of the country in time before they locked the borders. So I think Peru is very high on the list. And then I would say, secondly, I'm a huge proponent of Italy and Greece, and I don't think there's ever a bad time to go to either of those places. So one of those three would probably be my first answer.
Nice. Well, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Kadir, same question back to you. What's the first place that you would want to visit?
This is probably the longest I've gone without seeing my parents or my in-laws since my wife and I got together. So my parents are in Baltimore, Maryland. I live in Los Angeles right now. My in-laws are in Guatemala. Would love to get on a plane and go see them both before getting on another plane and disappearing out of the country for a month.
Annie, how about you?
Me, I'd go back to Shanghai to see my family. My parents are here and my sister is here, but it's been about a year and a half, and those relatives have been asking us constantly because they've been back to normal for a while now. So they've been asking us pretty consistently when we're coming back. So hopefully that's soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I wish that we could just keep going. Now I just want to talk about our own personal travel plans. But hopefully you guys will come back to our virtual stage again soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you for having us. Have a good day.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So our next session coming up, we will be hearing from Steve Graish, who is the Vice President of Global Marketing, Head of Travel, E-commerce, and Core Product Marketing at Visa. He will be moderated by Courtney Kerrigan, the Director of Consulting Services at Newstar. Hi, Steve. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Annie.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
For joining us. Doing well. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Doing
Awesome.
great, thank you.
All right, here I go. I'm passing over the virtual mic to you, Courtney, for your intros, and I will be back once you guys wrap up.
Awesome. Well, Steve, how's it going this morning?
I'm doing great, Courtney. How about yourself?
Very good. Very good. Very relaxing. Long weekend. Nothing happened because you can't do anything today.
it limits your choices.
You have to
too
relax.
much choice can be a bad thing. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Should we jump right in?
Let's go for it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So you have a really interesting career trajectory. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you made your way to Visa?
Happy to, and thank you to you and Brand Innovators for having me and Visa this morning. Well, you can probably just about still tell I'm from Scotland originally. I've lost most of my accent, as my family and friends tell me, but I've still got some of it. But I've been living in California in the US for the last 15 years. I've been at Visa for over a decade in a variety of roles, both in the US and then in global, in sponsorships and brand and product marketing. I've had the good fortune to work with what is a really world-class team on a range of fantastic initiatives. London Olympics, 2014 World Cup, and then more recently on travel and product marketing. It's never been a better time to be at Visa, frankly. It's an incredible business. We're very purpose-led. We're really transforming the way that the world moves money and reshaping global commerce, which is like a huge rock for us. And we're also making really big strides and focus on advancing inclusion and progress for everyone everywhere, which is just so important. Prior to Visa, I was in alcohol and the beer business specifically. And I was in the UK and European roles and global roles, and then in the US with Heineken, working on a range of different brands. So I did that for nearly 12 years actually, which is a lot of fun. Quite different in some ways from the tech world and the payments world and commerce world, but also some similarities for sure.
Yeah, were there any learnings that you were able to bring over from the adult beverage industry to Visa and to travel specifically?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think on the face of it, the categories are quite different, but there are definitely similarities. And I would say, I just think from a marketer's perspective, it was really important within the FMCG world and in the beer business and in Visa as well, that you think of yourself and act of yourself as a business person first, that you really know the business, that you have commercial acumen, and that you can have a seat at the table with other functional teams and functional leaders, so that you have credibility. And ultimately, I think great marketing strategy is anchored in great understanding of the business opportunity and the business strategy more broadly. So that's kind of, for me, is just like a fundamental of, regardless of where one goes, having commercial acumen is really important. Other things from a marketing perspective, in terms of fundamentals, the core of audience insights and understanding, whether it's a human that is a consumer or a human that is a B2B audience, that's just really important. And it's not as easy as it sounds, like being able to really glean insights rather than just information. There's an important difference between those. And then getting into the fundamentals of championing the customer, developing campaign work, defining strategy, all the technical skills around brand and product marketing and measurement, media planning, go-to-market, etc. I think those are all I think those are all very, very similar. I think the other is, and it's shifted a little bit, I think the other is behavioral skills. And I think they're increasingly the same no matter where you go. But it's shifted in my time. When I started in 25 years ago, there was more of a sort of center and command and control culture within the business. And teams were managed in a more sort of direct, we'll tell you what to do, go and do it sort of approach. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was definitely a bit more sort of command and control. And fortunately, the world has changed. And certainly at Visa, we have just fantastic leadership. We have a set of leadership principles that we are measured against, which is really important. It's not just the results you achieve, it's how you achieve them, judged through the lens of their leadership skills, which I think is fundamentally forces a certain level of behaviors that is super positive and super productive. And I think part of the shift has been moving from this command and control to much more of a sort of servant leadership approach. And back in the day, you perhaps were able to tell people what to do, or you were told what to do, whereas now we really want to inspire people. We want to have a collective vision, a sense of purpose, and we want to all be pulling in the same direction. And so that was definitely different in my early days, and that's definitely something that I see at Visa, and I'm sort of hearing, and as other people talk, I'm hearing similar themes in different organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same at New Star too. So I think, when consumers think of Visa, I don't think travel is typically the first thing that comes to mind. So how does Visa see themselves playing a role in the travel industry?
Yeah, it's a big part of our business. Travel is a big part of Visa's business. We're fortunate. Visa's the fifth largest brand in the world. And we have a purpose that is grounded in Visa being the trusted engine of commerce. And our approach is the belief that economies that include everyone everywhere, uplift everyone everywhere. It's a really, really powerful purpose for us. And travel is an amazing opportunity to include everyone everywhere and to uplift everyone everywhere. One of the big benefits of Visa is the scale. And not only the fifth largest brand, but also just the level of the global scale of the business is incredible. We operate in over 200 countries around the world. We have over 3.3 billion cards in people's wallets, physical or digital, which is incredible. We're available over 60 million merchants around the world, over 2 million ATMs. So there is the network of Visa is huge and vast, and that's a massive benefit when it comes to travel. And it's often taken for granted. It's often taken for granted. But the ability to travel around the world and pay seamlessly with a Visa card just makes travel a heck of a lot easier. So that's a huge that scale of network is critical. And the other piece of it is just the level of trust and security that the Visa brand has. The network is extremely secure, and there's a huge amount of work, investment that goes on to predict ahead of time where fraud might happen to stop it. And there's also, we have benefits like zero liability, which means that fraudulent charges on your card, you're not charged for those. And so unlike cash, if you lose your cash or someone steals it, Visa is money you can't lose. And so that scale of the network, the trust of the brand is kind of critical. And then ultimately, we use that to communicate to consumers around the world with advice on the best way for them to pay as they're traveling around the world. So you'd be amazed, Courtney, like a huge amount of cash. Well, when people were traveling, it seems like a while ago, when people were traveling, there was a huge amount, $500 billion a year of cash that people basically take as cash on their trip and spend. And that means you have to exchange it, you pay fees to do so. The last survey we did, the average traveler in the US was bringing back $150 in unused currency that primarily sits in a drawer and is never used again. Yeah,
I have a jar like
that. Sadly, I do too. Mine's is a little bit older, but it's more memories. But so we engage with consumers across the travel journey before they're traveling, when they're planning and booking, when they're during travel, and then when they're at destination. And we serve up information that gives them great information on the best way to pay. And that's actually been super effective for us, and consumers really appreciate that information.
Yeah. And that kind of touches on my next question, which is, how does Visa engage with consumers, and how does the message differ depending on the type of consumer that you're engaging with?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we've become quite sophisticated at it, in the sense that the reality is that number one, when I talked about this network of Visa, we also have this network of people, very talented people in marketing and other functions, including a cross-border business unit that's dedicated to this effort. And so we spend a lot of time ensuring that we're engaging with consumers in a consistent manner across the travel journey. So if Courtney's traveling from LA to London, we'll look to message you when you're planning and booking, and we'll then look to message when you're on your trip, and then we'll receive you in London with the same creative and a different message because you're in a different part of the journey. And so we do that in a way that really leverages the best of Visa's talent internally. So that's kind of one piece. The other piece is just getting into the details of every travel corridor is different. So the LA to London corridor is very different, and as you know, from many other corridors. In fact, the corridors vary by season. Sometimes the leisure travelers are different. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's summer, sometimes it's winter, sometimes it's more business, sometimes it's less business. So there's understanding the composition of the travel corridors is really important. And then in a data compliant way, we basically use information to ensure that the messages that we're serving and the creative we're serving is relevant to the trip that individual is taking. So again, we'd only serve a summer thematic or an urban thematic if someone was going in the summer to a city. And conversely, we change that depending upon the seasonality. And similarly, we know that pre-trip things like booking flights and hotels is a much bigger purchase occasion. When you're at destination, the biggest transactions typically are retail and entertainment, and so the messages relate more to that. It's common sense, but probably not as easy to execute as it perhaps sounds. But we've been doing that for a few years, and the results have been really strong in terms of usage intent lift and actual usage lift, because we can measure that too, as well as the return on investment that we're getting.
Yeah, wow. Well, and I think you guys have such an interesting viewpoint of the whole travel industry. And so while this question is really obvious, how has COVID impacted travel from Visa's point of view?
Yeah, I doubt there's an industry more affected. And listening to Lou earlier, saying the same thing. I mean, it's just had a huge effect on travel. I saw some numbers last week that indicated that due to the pandemic, there will be a loss of global GDP due to travel of between 1.5% and 2.8%. So at a high level, like nearly 3% of GDP, which is incredible when you think of that at a global level. And there's been, obviously huge declines in air travel and hotels. I think hotels have been typically 40% down year on year. Air transport internationally is down 70%, domestic down about 30%. So it's had a huge impact on the numbers. I think the human part of this, though, Courtney, is really important. And I mean, the numbers are incredible, but ultimately people want to be together. People want to feel like they belong, and we're social animals at the core, and we know that people around the world are feeling lonely. In the recent survey, I think nearly 60% of those people that were surveyed, not travelers, just people generally, that really missed their extended family and friends, and a quarter of Americans admitted to feeling sort of lonely or empty. And I suspect that perhaps it's a little bit higher than that. And often, in surveys, sometimes the read is a little bit off. So there's been a huge effect on the industry, and then there's a big effect on people and their ability to do what they want to do and spend time with people they want to spend time with.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting that I think most people are thinking now about visiting family as opposed to big exciting trips for sure too. But the focus now is like, let's go see the family. Let's go see all the friends that I've missed for 2 years or however long it's going to end up being.
Lee was saying that earlier. Like, well, I'm going to visit want to visit my family, and then on the back of that, I'll do another trip. I think that's going to be common. I think that's going to be commonplace.
Yeah, exactly. Got to go see my grandma. When do you think travel will recover? And I mean, do you foresee pent up demand that's going to help out?
Huge. Yeah, this 100%. We've been tracking this for a while. There's a massive level of pent up demand. There has been really since this thing kicked off in earnest. Last March or April, and the pent up level is only gone up. There's huge levels of pent up demand. People really missing leisure travel in particular. They're visiting family and friends is a top rank. People are missing business travel less. That's ranking lower in that's the part they've missed the least, although people still do miss that. It just ranks way lower than family and friends and general vacation. Huge amounts of pent up demand. When is it going to come back is the question, isn't it? We don't have a crystal ball, but we do have lots of great data and lots of really smart analysts at Visa, both in marketing and within our decision sciences group, and there's lots of data coming out from that team. I believe global tourism, again, this is a forecast, so things may change. I believe global tourism is expected to fully recover by around about 23, 24, but domestic travel likely to recover 1 to 2 years before that. And so I think we're looking at a situation that domestic travel may actually exceed pre-COVID levels, so 2019 levels, probably in Q3 2022, and probably 1 or 2 years ahead of international. And I think even the international travel is more likely. It's going to be more likely to be to safer corridors. Probably going to start with shorter haul rather than longer haul. But then that will start to expand. As more people are vaccinated, that will lead to some of the big corridors starting to open up.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and what do you think the path forward is for when travel does become feasible? Does it look different? What considerations are being, thought about now? And will there be a difference by age group? And what do you guys think?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely what's hard about this, and we have lots of information, and the information indicates, and whether we're listening to consumers from social listening or doing qualitative research or larger quant studies, indicates that there's going to be a preference for more safe and remote destinations. And so, and I think it's perhaps common sense, but people are going to go to more open areas. They're going to go to more relaxing destinations or places that allow them to be outdoors, as opposed to places that are more urban and more enclosed. So I think that's definitely so. And clearly, health and safety. It's going to be a while before people are comfortable being in larger crowds. So I think that's probably one of the major shifts. And then the others that we talked about, just the motivations, I think are going to change a little bit. The motivation is going to be more about connecting with family and friends, and then perhaps later people might do things that they're sort of a typical vacation.
Yeah. And how is Visa? You mentioned you guys have a lot of data and awesome data analysts over there. How are you guys preparing for the future now, and how are you using that data to plan while we have this downtime? Not downtime, but
no. It is an opportunity for us to kind of take a step back and dust off and think through what do we maintain from what we were doing before, and how do we evolve, and so we're doing a few things. So one is just that the data. We have a recovery dashboard that is pulling data from a variety of sources so that we can understand where's the sustained recovery happening, and what is that pattern of sustained recovery look like, and when that starts in one area, are we going to see that replicating in other areas? And then we'll use that data internally to help inform when we start to invest, working with our publicist partners on the media front. We'll use that to help determine how do we start to invest and where. On the creative and campaign side of things, we're definitely modifying the imagery and the messages to be fit for purpose. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we will remove imagery that is sort of pack tourists in an obvious urban environment for more open environments and more inverted commas, more of a feeling of safe and relaxing. So that's work. Yeah, that's work that we'll be doing with Wieden, our partners at Wieden and Kenny. It's super interesting. There's also that same data and a lot of consulting services that we provide to our many clients around the world. And so we obviously we partner with issuing banks, with merchants around the world, with partners in many categories, including Hilton, with government bodies and tourist organizations. And so we have a lot of consulting services internally that we make that data available to, and can also work with them to develop marketing programs on their behalf. So that's another part. While we have one effort focused very much on the consumer, there's multiple audiences that we're also working with and making sure that we're sharing our thinking on how to best react to the travel recovery when it comes back. And there are also some specific things that matter to consumers that we can include. So we know that some of the benefits that come on our Visa cards, we want to make sure that those are super relevant to the times. Travel insurance is increasingly important to travelers because they want to make sure that they have surety of the trip happening. And also it's an opportunity for us to talk about many of our specific products and product innovations that have a particularly important role in the future of the travel recovery.
Yeah, actually, are there any innovations that we can look forward to coming from Visa in the world of travel?
Yeah, for sure. And there's a whole range of things. A couple that I will talk about today. One is contactless payment, tap to pay payment. And so the technology within your card, it allows you to just tap your card at a terminal, get a beep and pay and be on your way. You don't have to insert your card. You certainly don't have to hand over any cash that has been used multiple times and has been in lots of different hands, which doesn't feel very appealing now and probably ever again. So the contactless has been actually was a big focus of Visa before pandemic, and it's accelerated. People that are listening that are in Europe and the UK are probably think, well, it's not really an innovation. We've had this for a few years, and it's right. It's grown massively in the UK, in parts of Europe in the last few years, and it's grown in the US massively in the last 2 years. So tap to pay transactions represent more than 50% of face-to-face transactions outside of the US, and I think we can look to expect in the next few years we'll get to a similar point in the US. So that is great. The fact that more issuing banks are sending cards that have contactless enabled is great. The other one is super interesting, and it's also close to my heart because my team is working on it, and it's Visa installments. So installments payments, which is the ability to pay for items over a predetermined period of time, often without incurring any interest. This is a category that is exploded, and people will be familiar with it. It's exploded in many markets. It's been around in many parts of the world for a while. It's huge in Latin America, but has not been big in modern times in other markets until really the last couple of years. Has been a lot of growth. So we're doing a lot of really interesting work in that area. We launched our first with our first US bank, Commerce Bank, in the US in November last year, and we are working fast and furious with a range of plans in a number of other markets to accelerate launch this year. And what's great about it is that you typically use an existing line of credit. You're not applying for new credit on your credit card. You use existing line of credit on a credit card and then on a debit card also, and it's perfect for those high ticket items that either you want to trade up to a more expensive item. You go from my wife laughs because I always use the flat screen TV example. So you go from the 65-inch to the 80-inch screen because you can pay for it over a period of time, or in the context of a vacation, that maybe you go to the Deluxe Hilton room, or the Deluxe Airbnb, or you go business and not economy, and you can pay for it over agreed predetermined period of time. So in terms of giving consumers flexibility to pay, and particularly now, given where we are with the economy, I just think it's super exciting. It just adds an extra level of flexibility and control to consumers.
And maybe brings things within reach that wouldn't otherwise be within reach.
There's going to be, we're probably fortunate in our jobs that we get to travel in the old days, and I'm really hoping that part of the benefit of Visa installments set of APIs that really enables the banks and merchants to offer that. I'm really hoping that opens up travel and trips to a whole set of consumers that otherwise wouldn't be able to do it, because that just has such a sense of purpose with it. So that's what I'm really hoping we can do in the next couple of years in the context of installments and travel.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So changing tracks a little bit, we were talking about the incredibly sad and important piece in Adweek last week by Eric Toda about the dreadful violence that has been occurring for Asian Americans against Asian Americans recently. Did you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, thanks, Courtney, thanks for raising that. I don't know Eric, but I read the piece, and I was just so shocked and saddened. I think in the article, Eric mentions like a staggering, like a 2,000% increase in violence against Asian Americans in the US. I think it was actually just in New York in the last year.
Jeez.
And some of the cases that were in there that included were just heartbreaking. And so, yeah, I'm first and foremost, I'm really proud that Visa is taking a stance and action to advance inclusion and progress for everyone everywhere. That's like core to the Visa brand and our leadership, and we have a big focus on it across the organization, which is just so important. Visa's foundation announced last year that we essentially have a $200 million commitment to support micro and small businesses around the world, with a focus on fostering women's economic advancements, and that's really important. We also announced last year a $10 million fund to create dedicated Visa scholarship program over the next 5 years, specifically for college-bound Black and African American students. And upon graduation, all of the recipients will be guaranteed a job offer from Visa. So there's significant financial commitment, but also there's taking real action, as well as within the business, really supporting our efforts for all the employees to really be allies in this effort around social justice of all types. So I'm hoping that again, thanks Eric for writing the piece, and I'm hoping that the industry can continue to not only shine a light but take action in all areas of social justice.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about that. It's really inspiring to hear that a company as big as Visa is taking it so seriously. So that's awesome. All right. So I think we have a few minutes still. I have a few quick fire questions. Are you open for some fun questions?
Can I have a sip of tea first?
Take a sip of tea.
Okay. I might need it.
All right. All right. First thing you do when you get up in the morning.
Oh goodness. Desired versus reality.
Right.
Either my cat or my 3.5-year-old daughter jumps on me, but if that doesn't happen, I have to stretch. Do a good stretch. Too many aches and pains these days.
Yeah, to prepare for the cat or the daughter jumping on you.
Yeah,
I relate.
Exactly.
I have 2 sons that jump on me, so I get it. Latest Netflix binge.
Oh, I love this French show called Spiral. It's a French detective show. Late to the party. It started in 2005, and it's just finished its 8th season, and we're into season 4, or halfway through season 4. Spiral. It's so good. Yeah, very good.
That's awesome. Sounds good. I'll have to check that out. I'm trying to watch shows that have no less than 3 seasons because I get through them. So
you go 8. It's there you go. It's a good one.
So much TV. All right. Current book you're reading.
I'm reading Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is amazing. Lots of people have recommended that one, and just Phil Knight's story of Nike, and I'm halfway through that. I'm loving that, and I'm reading a book by Irvin Welsh, a Scottish author who wrote Trainspotting, which became huge film. His last book, The Played Artist, which kind of takes me a little bit takes me home. So I'm trying to read it one chapter of each of those each day.
Okay, cool, nice. How about beach or mountains?
I could do either, but I'm a big fisherman, so mountains would be the call.
Mountains, yeah. I'm beach just because it's just so local. It's so easy to go.
Hard to beat.
Favorite podcast these days?
All over the map. I listen to, this is very niche, I listen to it's called the Scottish Football Podcast. I doubt many listeners or viewers or that's high on their list. And then the Daily, I like the New York Times The Daily. I listen to that in the mornings.
Cool. And then champagne or wine?
Got to be beer for me. If I had to choose between champagne or wine, it would be wine, but I'm really very occasional wine drinker.
That makes sense. You did start off in the beer industry.
Yeah. There's roots there.
Yeah.
What about you?
I go with wine. It depends on the day, but wine typically, sometimes beer if it's one of those like hot days, depends.
Have you got a favorite wine?
No, I'm not a wine person really. My dad is. I hope he's not watching this at all. He would be disappointed. Our secret. So I was looking, and I don't see any questions yet, but I still think we have a few more minutes. I was noticing that your title is quite long at Visa, and that travel is just one tiny word in the title. Do you want to explain what else you do over there at Visa? What else you focus on?
Yeah. So there's a few things that our team is focused on beyond travel. One of them is e-commerce, which is just so huge. But again, we have akin to travel. We have a really, really great set of value propositions for consumers and clients when it comes to using Visa to pay for things online. Mm-hmm. And so e-commerce has been a big focus of our business, and it will be even more moving forward. And as travel has obviously ground to a halt, e-commerce has just exploded. And so we've been working with our marketing colleagues around the world on programs to kind of address that opportunity, which is huge. I talked a bit about some of the core product work with installments earlier. And we also have a sort of separate but related program around certain audiences, including affluent, which and I really mean not just high net worth, but very broad segment of affluent, from mass to kind of core to high net worth, who typically have higher level of purchase power on their existing cards, and have some particular needs as well. So we spend a significant amount of time on some programs to those affluent audiences as well around the world. So those are some of the main things. And then there's also just a lot of partnership work with other parts of the organization and other parts of marketing. We have an amazing brand team, and we're doing a lot of work with that team and others on sort of joint programs, as well as we have a world-class set of sponsorship assets with being a global Olympic sponsor, being NFL sponsor, FIFA sponsor, as well as many sponsorships in the world of fashion and others. So there's a lot of really great work that comes out of that as well.
I'm really looking forward to some Summer Olympics. I'm really missing those.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think the world really do with that.
Yeah, I know. All right, we got some questions here. So let's see. How do you envision technology changing, if at all, to support a new generation of workers who work from home?
Yeah, I was listening to something recently, and the gentleman whose name I can't remember was just, from an investment perspective, he was just talking about the importance of the home and divesting from commercial real estate and investing in residential real estate And so anything that is screen-based, anything that allows you to interact with and collaborate with colleagues internally and externally in a secure and seamless manner, those are going to be huge. I mean, we've seen what's happened to Zoom, obviously, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that. So I think that's probably the one thing. And then there's going to be the same effect in offices for those people that are back in an office, even if it is in a sort of hybrid model. We're not going to be in a situation, I hope, certainly not at Visa. I know we're not going to be in a situation where the person that's not in the office is at a disadvantage. Like, we're going to have the technology so that that person is fully there and they're included as such. So I think that's probably a big shift. I think beyond that, just everything IoT related is going to explode given the capabilities of 5G and everything else. Everything IoT related. We're already getting our groceries delivered inside our house through Amazon Fresh, and the next step is having them delivered in the fridge, right? So that feels not that far away. And what's the next step? What's the next evolution of that? There's going to be obviously a massive focus in that area, and it feels like it's right on top of us as well.
Yeah, and a couple more questions, I think, which are sort of in line with the COVID theme. But do you think there will be a vaccine passport to travel?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
it's a really great question. I don't know. I've listened to some of the experts on this who are erring on the side of no, partly from a sort of data privacy perspective, albeit given you need like certain vaccines to go to certain countries. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You need go to Nigeria, for example. You have to have your yellow fever certificate, and vaccination needs to be live. So I'm not sure if I buy that. So, but I think the other argument against it that I heard was that there are so many variants and unknowns about how long the vaccine is going to last and what the vaccine really does. Either it stops you making sick, but you can still transmit. So I think given it's a year old as a vaccine, there's a lot that we still don't know. Yeah. So I think it's unlikely, but who knows? Yeah, really interesting question.
Yeah, totally. Hi, Annie. I think we have one more question. Do we have time for another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, awesome. Let's see. With such great assets and partnerships, what does the future look like with Visa loyalty rewards programs?
Oh, that's a great one. So we have, and I kind of inferred on this earlier, but didn't really expand on it. Many Visa cards come with benefits and rewards that are provided by Visa and in many cases provided by the issuing banks, and they're tailor-made to really make to fit with the lifestyles of specific cardholders. So you care about shopping, you care about travel. There was a set of cards and benefits that link to those. So I think that they've been really important historically at creating loyalty amongst consumers, and they've been important at attracting consumers to certain portfolios within the banks that issue those cards. That's going to continue for sure. That what's happened this year is that the travel benefits have kind of been ramped down a little bit in some areas, but they've been changed by they've been replaced by benefits that really matter today. And our US team has done that this year, where we have partnerships that divested out of some that are not as relevant because they were travel related, and have invested in those that are more relevant today, including a partnership with a security company that I won't talk about now, but which is coming up soon. So that's an example. I think they're still going to be really important moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very exciting.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us today and bringing a really unique perspective to the future of travel. The last time we did this event was, I believe, in June of last year, which I can't believe that it's been about 7 or 8 months since we had that conversation. Like, that feels super fresh, and there were so many unknowns, right? And now there are still so many unknowns, but it sounds like everyone's learned so much over the last 8 months. So let's do this again soon. Maybe we won't wait 8 months this time, and would love to get both of you guys to join us again.
Sounds
Happy
good.
to do
Thank you.
so.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Courtney.
Bye.
All right, and on to our next panel. So we have Angelique Miller, the Director of Brand and Marketing Partnerships at Expedia, who's going to be joining us. And she will be moderated by Jonathan Bolden, the Executive Director of Transformation at AKQA. Hi, Angelique. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
Hi, Annie. Hi, Jonathan.
How you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can jump right into your conversation, and I will be back soon.
Hi, cool.
Thanks, Annie. Hi, Angelique. How are you?
I'm very well. How's it going?
Good, good. Let's maybe start out with just a basic one. I'd love for you to just expound a little bit on your role at Expedia Group. You have a pretty unique role, what you do internally in-house for Expedia and for your partners, and we'll love to just kick off with that.
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone who's taking the time to be with us today. So I lead creative and brand partnerships at Expedia Group Media Solutions globally. We are essentially our in-house creative agency. And I think we like to believe that we are a team of passionate travelers who quite simply like to inspire other travelers through our ideas and the way in which we dream up and bring those ideas to life. So I'm originally from the US. I spent a decade in the kind of New York media scene before moving to London, where I now reside on my third lockdown with my husband and 2 kids. So that's me. If you're not familiar with Expedia Group Media Solutions, we are the global advertising division of Expedia Group. We essentially we allow them access to our data, strategic insights, targeting, solutions, reporting that hopefully just engage and help our audience convert with travel and to experience the world.
So fascinating, and it's kind of fun to talk about travel right now when we can't travel.
Is it fun or is it depressing?
Well, hopefully maybe it's a little bit inspiring. Maybe we're reaching the end of this, and I actually thought I would ask you just a quick icebreaker of, being in your third lockdown, being a dreary London winter. What is the first trip that you're just dying to book once you get past all this for you and your family, or maybe by yourself? Maybe you need a little alone time.
I need so much alone time. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I need so much alone time. It's funny because if you asked me that question, a year ago, I would have said that my next holiday was going to be a far-flung exotic destination, and with my husband and time to unwind and relax. But I must say, I think what everyone's feeling is, missing out on those important moments, those connections with really important family and friends. So I must admit that it's going to just go back home, back to the US, back to New York, back to the East Coast, and to see everyone that I really haven't seen in a really long time. I have a 1-year-old, and there are people and really, really important people in my life that have not met her, and that's that sucks.
Yeah, that's an incredible anecdote. Just what we're in right now. So many people haven't seen family or met new family, or it's just there's so much catching up to do. Well, let's dive into some of these questions on the future of travel. I know you have such a unique perspective. I'd love to kind of rewind to. Go ahead.
No, I was saying you're in Atlanta, right?
I'm in Atlanta. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, let's rewind a little bit and talk about pre-COVID. I'm kind of curious as we think about the future of travel from this point of view. Before COVID, travel was an all-time high, both consumer and business travel. It felt like there was so much competition from airlines, from hotels, from OTAs to grab the consumer's mind share.
have a direct relationship with consumers, own more of their journey. What was the mindset of Expedia pre-COVID? Like, what were you seeing that you were hoping to do, and the trends you were hoping to take advantage of with consumers at that point in time?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think that was only a year ago, right? It was, our ambition for what the travel industry was, it was at an all-time high, right? I think particularly our focus areas for Expedia Group as a company were going into 2020 is removing that travel friction, because there is so much, ability to go and book and do and facilitate your own travel. There's also so much choice, but with choice comes a lot of questions, like, is this the right decision? And so for us, it was about trying to remove those barriers, trying to remove that kind of uncertainty and give people confidence when it comes to their bookings. I think it was about driving personalization, and really, I think most importantly, creating that loyalty, because there is so much choice. What sets ourselves apart from everyone else that you can go and book with directly? And so through that lens, as a full service OTA, online travel association, we definitely feel that we can help you get the most out of your customer journey, right? So no matter where you are in it, whether you're booking with us or not, like, it's all about us helping you to travel confidently.
Yeah.
And the way in which we can achieve that, I think the common thread is through data, which isn't a new trend, wasn't a predicted new trend in 2020. But I think how we were using it, and how we were able to move beyond just observing and learning travel behavior versus pivoting and kind of truly predicting the needs of the traveler and engaging with them in a more personal and meaningful way. So for us, it was about the fact that the customer simply can't feel like they're a transaction.
Yeah.
And that we really can be there for them every step of the way.
It does seem very true. I mean, you really have that end-to-end view of what they're doing the whole way, whether it is the airline or the hotel or the experiences they book through you. You have that trove of data. I'm curious.
We do.
I'm curious. We'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But I'm curious, when COVID hit, and you have all these grand plans, and you're like, this is where we're moving to, and we're rocking and rolling. How did you triage? How did you, keep morale up? And what was the mood? And frankly, how did you even think about like how to move forward with so much chaos?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same sentiment we've heard earlier in some of the chats. I've been really impressed by the way in which the industry, and then I can speak specifically to Expedia Group, in terms of how everyone has really worked hard through this pandemic to do our part, right, to help the market recover as quickly and as efficiently as we can. And I see colleagues still, after a slog of 9-10 months, going above and beyond what their quote unquote day jobs are, to really try to just look at things differently and how we can do things better. Our biggest challenge, to answer your specific question, was supporting and serving our travel partners and our shared traveler customers, right? That is always our priority. It's always our focus. And I think the pandemic or not, that didn't change. Yeah. But it meant that it made things really, really challenging, right? We had to implement, very, very quickly new tools. We had to, it forced us to make, quite significant changes to the way in which we were servicing our customers through our customer service centers, the way in which we were, really, again, if a certain division within the company was feeling a bit of a kind of downtime, they were pointing their direction in how they could innovate new technologies that would help deploy faster innovations that, that help that customer service kind of space. We looked at streamlining communications, given the fact that now everyone was remote, and how do we connect on a global basis. And then lastly, I think from my specific remit within Media Solutions, we actually deployed financially a pretty significant relief fund. So we made available to our partners $25 million of destination recovery, which essentially was us, despite the fact that we were losing, as a company, quite a lot of money. We were also making sure that we were, kind of putting our own kind of back in, and we were showing up to say, like, look, we want to help you recover, and you can access this additional money in order to recover your own destinations, or recover your own objectives.
I'm sure they deeply appreciated that commitment. I love you to unpack just.
It's ongoing.
What's that? It's ongoing.
Ongoing, yeah.
I'd love for you to unpack.
It's I think the challenges never stop, right, to date.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the theme of. It feels like the theme of the last 9 to 12 months is how do we just keep evolving? The rules of the game feel like they keep changing daily, weekly, monthly. And I'd love to hear how, you're in a creative space and your team is in a creative space. How have you helped your team foster innovation or creativity when the rules of the game really are unknown, and you're trying to pivot and you're trying to evolve and stay relevant and make the best of the situation?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it's not always one that's asked. I think those questions are, it sometimes seems a bit, when you're in the creative space, it seems maybe a bit fluffy as to how you can directly impact things. It's more, when, budgets are being slashed and unfortunately people's jobs are being affected. How do you make sure that advertising is meaningful? How do you make sure that marketing is meaningful and that you're actually contributing to a space that I just got a notification that my connection was unstable. So
I can hear you.
You can hear?
Yeah.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, you're
okay.
Good.
Very odd. I think it's one that I was very aware of, and how particularly my role and my team was making sure that we were pivoting appropriately. I think the fact is that, we believe that travel is essential to everyone, right? It's essential to businesses, it's essential to, economies, the world. Tourism plays an incredibly critical role in invigorating economies and supporting that destination recovery that we just spoke about. And whether it's a pandemic or a natural disaster, we know that we have to react in these circumstances, and we have to react quite quickly, right? So I think that for me, it's about pairing creative with data and insights. And it's, data insights have always been the foundation of our partnerships, of our business, about serving the customer. It's even more critical in times of adversity. And when the landscape, quite frankly, changes every hour, right? Like, you never know what the new day is going to bring. And so I'd say first, it was our ability in terms of that pivot landscape to react as quickly as we could, as in real time as we could, to share those insights that we have, because we do have access to so much data, to share those latest global and market trends and insights with our partners that could help them assist in their own business decisions, right? We've been openly sharing that. We sit on a lot of first-party data. And from the onset of the pandemic, we've gone from in-market conferences and WTM and travel events, etc., to really pivoting to webinars, direct discussions with with partners, identifying other, key industry touch points that we feel that we can just really help, give more insight as to how, we can help the industry recover.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting.
On the creative lens.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, like, that's super data driven. But for me, I get, I love to influence creative, but when I get too into the like maths of it, I get a bit bored. So I'm like, oh God, can we just go paint a nice picture somewhere? I think what we've also done in certain instances, we I would say a month into the pandemic, my team developed a campaign called Where Next, which was really just to kind of keep that travel dream alive. We kind of saw where everything was heading, and we just quickly built and launched a straightforward but pretty powerful online platform that I think really just invites people around the world to discover that breadth and depth and and diversity of the world, and that's ready to be explored again when travel returns. And so just really image heavy information, helping, I guess, to keep our destination partners kind of front and center. And I think, it was light, it was fun. It was something that distracted, I think, from, if you can go back to March, April, that kind of dark, anxious time, that, just felt like, okay, it's just a little something we can do that doesn't have any payoff at all. It's just for people to explore and to dream.
Well, and it strikes me too, that kind of back to your original point of pre-COVID, your advantage and a lot of what you had to offer was related to data, to personalization, understanding the consumer. Doing something like that gives you even more data. Where do they want to go when things recover? And that gives you the opportunity to be a better partner and say, hey, we see lots of people want to go to Iceland. So maybe you work with the Iceland tourism, agency and help them think about here's the people you want to go target. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I imagine like that just continues to develop that advantage that you have to really be an effective partner.
Yeah. It's a flywheel, right? Everything we do is about helping customers, get where they want to go. There's no agenda to it other than the fact that we want to facilitate that travel.
Can you talk about maybe one of your partnerships that you've seen, that's come back online that they're willing to begin, they're starting to spend, and maybe how you've been, helped encourage confidence to travel or to think about where people might go next, just to kind of give some meat on the bones of what you actually do day in and day out.
Yeah, sure. I think I can talk about a really great partnership we've had this year with Destination Canada, which is the official tourism board of Canada. Don't need to be rocket science to figure that one out. We entered into a pretty big partnership with them in 2019, going into 2020, and it was, it had a that lens of, we're going to do a big global partnership where we're touching on multiple different, points of sale in multiple different countries with big, co-branded work and really sophisticated platform development. And, quite frankly, the pandemic halted that. And so I think what is great is that we were able to pivot, to go back to your word of the year, to pivot to the fact that we were able to say to Canada, like, and together we were able to still create a really, really powerful partnership, which last year was focused domestically. We know that domestic travel, our insights, our data has shown that domestic travel is very much, it's what everyone's doing at the moment when they can and they feel safe. And so we just simply pivoted the first steps of our partnership domestically. And that was great because we still set a really, really powerful foundation, creating a really robust content management platform where Canada as a country, but then all of their partners, their provinces, the cities can play into and contribute into the content into this digital platform. And also we launched a domestic TV campaign, which aligned with Canada Nice, which is their brand message around, it's called the Book of Nice. And it's essentially, really just playing to the fact that, Canadians are really nice people, and it's a really just wonderful place to be. But that was from a domestic standpoint. So it had, if you could have asked us when we entered into 2020 if this is how this partnership was going to be right now, we would have said no. But despite all of that, it's been better. It's been fantastic, and I think that's probably for me, maybe the lens that you need to take in terms of the pandemic. Like, things have changed, right? And you have had to pivot, you have had to move and redirect your thoughts, your energies, your, whatever it was that you were doing. But I think that the world kind of needed that reset. There's reasons for seasons, right? We all needed to breathe.
Yeah.
We needed to just take that moment and then reset ourselves. And I do think that the travel industry is fundamentally poised and has benefited from that reset. And so I'm quite excited to see where it's going to go from here, because, much like our partnerships, like, you just have to be flexible and you have to be able to kind of go with that change.
Yeah, I love that theme. And I think that, as we've looked across COVID and seen who's really succeeded, it has been those companies that, stuck to their core mission. And for you, that involves travelers who love to travel and inspiring others to travel, but found different ways or new ways to encourage that or apply that, and have been able to flex and evolve with the changing ethos that's come through COVID. I think it's really beautiful. Let's do a few, maybe some fun provocation, true or false game here, and then I think we'll take some questions. Okay. There will be an explosion of pent-up travel post-vaccine. True or false?
False. No one wants to travel.
Sarcasm.
Oh gosh, it couldn't be more true, right? It's absolutely true. I don't speak to a single person that isn't thinking about when and where they can travel. As I guess soon as lockdowns and kind of emerge and travel feels safe to do so. We did conduct a survey. It was probably about late fall, so maybe November, late October. And at that point in time, and again, there was kind of vaccines on the horizon, 57% of leisure travelers around the world did think that, with the kind of progress with science and access to this vaccine would make them feel more comfortable with traveling in the next 12 months. So I think that's, you kind of fast forward today, I think that's even more, that wasn't taking into account the further pent up, the desires to travel. I think now, personally, if you look at, where we are in a lockdown, it is the dead of winter in the UK, and you do need that light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think that the idea of just booking something to travel later is really, really great. It just gives you that mental, it gives you that mental health like boost that I think we all need. So yeah, I would say that it's without a doubt. And I think the travel industry is, if we could just see through that these next couple of months, then and continue to kind of, you know, accelerate and transform and innovate, then we'll be better for it, and we'll get there.
Are you seeing, this is related, it's not part of the true false game, but are you seeing an increase in advertising spend kind of behind that your partners are coming back and beginning to open up their wallets a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, we are, as a Expedia group, we are spending. You know, you may have seen that, you know, we're definitely back in market with spend from Expedia Group's perspective. I think Expedia, brand Expedia, and Verbo are some of the top marketers in kind of late 2020 and early 2021. So we definitely feel encouraged, and we definitely know that we need to be in market with the sentiment. I would say that we are still seeing the fact that our partners want to be spending, but there's just that bit of uncertainty. And what we've been able to do is provide them more flexibility in how they can, if they work with us, we do give them that flexibility, much like the same as travelers, right? You know, you want to book that trip, but you're like, are you sure that you can get your money's worth? And we know that every dollar counts right now. We know that you have to be really, really careful about how you're spending, you know, your own money and how you're spending your company's money. So we are, you know, leaning on those data points, insights, to make sure that if travelers, if partners are working with us, that they have that confidence and the flexibility that we are, you know, we're gonna really, really work as hard as we can to get them that return on their investments.
That's fantastic. Okay, a couple more of these true false. The CEO of Airbnb said, "I will go on the record that the travel will never, ever go back to the way it was pre-COVID. There are sometimes months when decades of transformation happen. And Chesky predicted that vacations will stay close to home in the future, largely limiting the travel to places within driving distance, with national parks becoming even more popular." Those are some broad sweeping predictions. True or false?
Oh gosh, can I ride the fence?
You can ride the fence.
I'll tell you why. I think I agree with some of it and I disagree with some of it. I agree that I think that, so I believe it's true that travel will never go back to what it was. But I say that because I don't think that that's bad. I think that I feel very energized to have a unique opportunity with a unique team within an incredible organization. And I don't just say that as lip service to, you know, it's, you know, one of the largest travel organizations in the industry, right? And I think that we have an incredible responsibility, an incredible opportunity to transform our industry into something bigger, into something better. And I do believe that most change is always good.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary. I think you just need to be open to it and you need to lean into it. I will disagree that I think in the near future, and you know, Chesky I think is going to lean into domestic travel because it is supporting, you know, the Airbnb model. But I do think that we'll continue to see in the short term that domestic travel does grow in popularity. I think we'll see that travelers do, you know, insist on kind of clear health and hygiene and, you know, maybe seeking more wide open spaces and all those things. But I don't think it's going to last. I think the very fundamental fact that we've been stripped of travel, it's been stripped from us. It's disconnected us from our friends, from our families. I think, you know, I hope that we won't take it for granted as much as we maybe did in 2019. I think that the pent up travel demand is real. I think that, you know, as we just said, with the vaccine rollouts, with lockdowns lifting, with the ability to feel safe, secure, I think that we'll just embrace this new normal. And then I think it might create some urgency. I think we might not put off that bucket list trip, you know, the ones that we wanted to experience with our you know, our closest, nearest and dearest any longer. So I think it's going to have from a kind of mid to long term, I think it's going to do the opposite.
I love that. And you kind of hit the next one, which was multi-generational travel will spike as people make up for lost time and realize the importance of family. And it seems like you're on board with that, but I love that notion of that, what you've said of people really do what's most important. Let's take that dream trip. Let's go with our parents or our kids, or let's not be as
selfish.
Yeah. So
I think exactly. Like you probably would have been like, I could definitely go and do a holiday by myself. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I would love that right now. I would love a massive spa weekend with my closest girlfriends. But actually, it's I think it is about reconnecting multi-generationally. There's been lots of families out there that have missed out on weddings, funerals. I've attended 2 funerals this year. Virtually, and it sucks, right? It's not great. And so those are the times when families are supposed to be together, and they've missed out on that, and it's really hard. So I think that again, like a reset, I think we all are now appreciating those connections, and those connections that we don't necessarily we don't get to have all the time.
I think you're hitting on some really great points of just the impact of COVID to our value system, and how our value system will eke into everything from how we consume to where we travel. And I think that's an undercard that probably should be paid more attention to in industry. Okay.
A lot of people do talk about transformation and innovation, etc. But I think sometimes it's just fundamentally like, what do we need as humans? Yeah. What do we need to kind of be leaning into? And I do like that. And I think that will have a positive impact on the types of innovations and types of things that we're creating, because it is certainly for me about connectivity.
That did bring up one question I did want to ask you before we go to Q&A. You talked about innovation there. Is there anything that you've seen pop up technology-wise, company-wise, business model-wise, that you're like, that's really interesting. Maybe it's a different way to think about travel, a different way to do travel, or something you have your eye on. Like this would be something we could benefit from.
Yeah, I think, it is a good question. It's like, kind of, where do you start, right? And where do you kind of go, like, where do we emerge from this, and where do you start? I think for me, it's been particularly enlightening to see how much innovation has already come out of the past year. So whether it's, adoption of virtual tourism and perhaps its future kind of impact on sustainability. It might be, simply seeing the fact that I do genuinely think that the travel industry, I think your first question was like, there's so much, so much options, so much stuff going on in the travel industry, and we were all kind of competing with each other. What's been great is to see that all of us are uniting through, whether it's, kind of incubation labs,
cool.
Kind of united in the fact that we want to, kind of our ambitions to accelerate our recovery and to emerge stronger. I think it's, I do look at kind of our industry partners, whether it's, how they maybe continue to transform themselves digitally, to better maybe the entire tourism experience, because I know that that's what we're looking at from an Expedia Group perspective, right? We're looking at that end-to-end customer journey, and there's only so much we can do when we're a solely kind of online platform. Right. But I think there's other ways in which the other touch points throughout their journey can actually kind of lean into this transformation. I would say that whether it's airports and hotels kind of, helping to be more efficient with navigation, all those pain points, kind of reducing the time in airport before your flight, making sure that, your check-in process is really seamless. Obviously, currently with regards to social distancing protocols, this is all really important. The fireside chat earlier with Visa, how to, kind of financial institutions can continue to kind of innovate across cross-border kind of payment ease, giving that confidence. And then I think really just destinations using maybe technology and innovation to perhaps build smarter city infrastructures, right? Like, how do they lean into that sustainability? How do they lean into actually when customers and travelers get into their destination, how are they navigating the actual places that they're visiting better? And so I think that's going to be really interesting. I think that lots of businesses have pivoted, over the last year. Restaurants, you got, healthcare with 24-hour access to doctors, and you've got families that are increasingly, very, very, very capable of, speaking to each other on Zoom. And I think all of that is going to lead to a multi-generational cohort of people that are incredibly comfortable with the digital space that perhaps didn't exist prior to COVID. And how do we use that to transform our industry, to make them more comfortable with and more easily kind of facilitate that travel around the world?
Do you see, and I need to get to one or two of these questions, but so much you said there I'm interested in. Do you see Expedia as being kind of the common touch point across the travel journey, or do you see it being integrated into hotel or airline or airport type apps or local destination apps?
We do work, very closely with all of those folks. I think that what we are trying to do as a business is to really, integrate for the consumer, so we become a singular touch point. It's not going to eliminate all of those other touch points, but I do think that we have a responsibility to play our part in helping them to navigate those things. So we're we work very closely with our hotel partners, our airline partners already, and I think that as we continue to evolve, for us, it's about a sentiment of empowering travel for the world. And that's for anyone, and it's for everywhere. And so I do lean into this sentiment of transactions and travel doesn't necessarily have to happen on Expedia. It can be a kind of global marketplace as you wish. And so I think for that, integration points become quite interesting.
That is fascinating. Okay, I'm gonna rapid fire these questions, Annie. I know that you're gonna cut us off here. What platforms have you relied on in the last year to reach travelers?
Our own platforms. We have a hugely global audience, and that has been really, really key. Obviously, all of the social media platforms, we know that people are conversing there. Pinterest has been one as well that has been surprisingly interesting to us in terms of, and I think it leans into the fact that people are so desperately leaning into that inspiration piece, and so we've used that as a platform to kind of play more in that upper funnel space, and then leaning into kind of more traditional channels. We've had some really cool TV and digital and programmatic campaigns that just don't necessarily facilitate any dialogue in terms of booking, just the fact that we're here when you're ready. We're here when you're ready to help you dream and to help you, get that next trip booked when you're ready and you feel safe.
Yeah. Annie, I'm going to read this last question, but I don't think it's an answer because it's more of a suggestion from the audience that maybe Angelique will appreciate. It says, spot on with the human connectivity, i.e. all the life events that have been missed out on this year. Will this message or these stories make their way in Expedia's go-to-market strategy in 2021? Maybe it's Where's Next 2.0.
Love it.
There you go. Leave you on that.
Love it. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Honestly, your questions were fantastic. And I think really, really gave me one to kind of think about and in the industry to think about. So thank you.
Thank you for your perspective. It's great to chat. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I feel like there's so much positivity and so much optimism in this conversation. It makes me really excited as a traveler and as the multi-generational type of traveler. My main goal this year, actually, because I knew that my dad was retiring and my mom's been retired, was to take them out and travel and do as much stuff as possible. They're both really leaning into being like super old as fast, like they're very active, right? But they're like, no, we're 70. I'm like, you're not, you're like 63, calm down. But they're totally leaning into that. So I planned this year to take them out and do all of these like wild things, right? For as long as possible. And we weren't able to do that just yet, but we're getting close. And I feel like I really appreciate your insights and your conversation, because it makes me feel like it's possible, and those plans can definitely happen.
It totally is possible. I squeezed a trip for my parents into, sort of spend some time in the UK. My dad's 83. He turned 83 this past, and so it was hugely, we were like, when's the right time to travel? When do we feel safe? Like, it was in between lockdowns. We basically isolated with them for, the time that we were here, but we made, it's so important to evaluate the risks and to actually just facilitate it when you feel comfortable, because it is absolutely so important to do those things that you just mentioned. Like, it's so rewarding, and I think we all are completely missing it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, fingers crossed. I think we're getting closer. And
like at the end of the tunnel, I think.
See it. I know, I can see it now. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. We hope you can come back really, really soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Right. That was fantastic. Okay, our next panel is going to be with Christine Kettmer, who is the Senior Director of Global Enterprise Insight and Strategy at Marriott International. And she'll be moderated by Jesus Ramirez, Vice President of Strategy at Tall Wave. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Annie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Hey, Jesus.
Hi there.
Hi, this has been an incredible lineup. It's been a really, really wonderful day. We're so excited that both of you could join us. So I will hand it over to you if you want to do introductions and get right into the convo.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to be here. So I'll kick it off. So my name is Jesus Ramirez. I am the VP of Strategy and Innovation at Tall Wave. Tall Wave is a customer experience design company. We partner with ambitious brands to help them grow, transform, and create entirely new forms of value. And with me is Christine Kettmer, Senior Director of Global Enterprise Insight and Strategy at Marriott International. And today we're going to be talking about the future of travel. But before we get to that, before we get started, I did want to share some unfortunate news, some sad news. Many of you may have seen that Marriott's president and CEO, Arne Sorensen, passed away. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, acknowledge this unfortunate news, and then also send a heartfelt condolences to his family, his friends, and everyone at Marriott. Christine, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you for those sentiments, and to everybody who's reached out so far. It definitely is a very hard day. And then a tremendous loss for the hospitality community and the Marriott extended family. Arnie was just an amazing person. He was incredibly approachable, but humble and brilliant, and just such a visionary. I mean, he transformed our company, and he was the first non-Marriott family member to serve as the CEO, our only third CEO in the company's history. We've been around for 94 years. And I think Mr. Marriott said it really well, that he was an exceptional executive, but just an exceptional human being. So huge loss, but thank you for those sentiments. And we'll definitely be continuing to pray and think about him and his family, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the entire community.
Yeah, huge loss. Thank you, Christine. So perhaps a good way to start our conversation is maybe for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I, as you said, am the Senior Director for Global Enterprise Insights and Strategy, which is a function at Marriott International. And I've been at the company for about 7 years now in different roles. But I started off my professional journey. I've always been interested in marketing and communications and consumer insights and behavior. And so started off working at a nonprofit at an NGO in Geneva, Switzerland, right out of college. I moved over there and did work for this human rights organization and marketing and communications. And then I pivoted to working on federal different campaigns for health and education and safety accounts here in Washington, D.C., moved back stateside. And I used to tell people all the time, like, I work on social marketing. I can teach people to brush their teeth, but I don't know how to sell toothpaste. So I really wanted to kind of get back into like the product side and the innovation. So that's what allowed me to pivot and go back full time to business school. And after business school, I did kind of the traditional CPG route. I worked at Johnson & Johnson for 3 years on the baby brands, on a couple of the beauty brands, and really did that, learned how to run a P&L, to be responsible for new product development. But I always just loved the kind of why behind people purchase different brands or they were attracted to different products. And so that's really kind of what led me into the consumer behavior space. So as I said, I've been at Marriott for about 7 years now in a couple different roles. I went back to brand management for a little while and worked on the JW Global Brand Team, the JW Marriott Global Brand Team for a couple of years, but have been in different roles related to insight strategy, customer experience, and just really helping to represent, like, what is that voice of the customer? What is it that's important to our guests? And where do we take their travel experiences into brands or directions or territories where we can go in the future?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a great journey. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your current team's responsibility and what you do at Marriott.
Sure. So our team is a relatively new team, but it's a great group that basically thinks about, like, where are we headed as a company? So what are we seeing in the trends and implications for our business? And how do we create sort of strategic opportunities for our leaders and for our brands, for the different business lines that we're involved in, so that we're really leaning into the kind of perspective of what's happening in the marketplace, what we're seeing in the data, what our guests are telling us, and just kind of representing that point of view. So we're thinking a lot about all the things, all the implications that are happening right now as a result of our business, but also just where are those opportunities, where are those bright spots, or where are the things that we can lean into, and where can we go in the future so that we're meeting the guests where they are, but we're also trying to drive loyalty and commitment to our brands in the long term.
Yeah, that's great. So definitely something we want to dive into throughout this session, but perhaps maybe a good place to start. Obviously, the last year has been, the travel and hospitality industry has been hit fairly hard. And but there have been some bright spots. You and I have spoken, and there have been some really interesting things. And so what have been the bright spots for you and your organization during the time?
Well, I think like the previous session was a great segue to talk about some of the things. Like, I mean, one thing is that we know there is that pent-up demand, that people are definitely looking forward to booking the next trip. And if anything, they're going to be more appreciative and I think cognizant of what that will mean when they're first on that airplane ride, or they're checking into the hotel, or even if they're getting the rental service or whatever it is to like that mode of transportation. So I think one of the bright spots is, even though it's been a little bit longer than obviously anybody would have hoped for or anticipated, there is that excitement and enthusiasm that when people want to plan a trip, that they're willing to do so, and that they're looking for that next vacation, or even excited about a conference or in-person networking opportunity to reconnect with colleagues. So I think the enthusiasm, that's something that really strikes me as a bright spot. I would also say, just in general, there are lots of opportunities for our guests in particular. Like, once they have a good stay, they're more inclined to tell other people about it. And so we're seeing some bright spots in social media and just like in our guest voice, which is our platform where we look at like all of the survey responses that come in. But once they have like a really good experience, like that first trip, and they take it, then they're more inclined to book something and either stay longer or try again, or again, post about it or share with others. So it really is about restoring that confidence, but making sure that we're doing all the things we've always done. The standards are incredibly high, but reinforcing like the cleanliness and the safety protocols, and really making sure that we're still enabling like that high touch, high tech service combination. So leaning into our associates, making sure that they're feeling trained to demonstrate the protocols, but also like deliver warm welcomes with a smile, even if you're wearing a mask and stuff too. So just really, trying to make sure that the enthusiasm is still there, and that we're ready to welcome our guests whenever that time is right for them.
Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting in our last conversation was that Marriott was one of the first to mandate mask requirements. And, to me, this is an indicator of leading through values and really placing an importance on not just guest safety. Obviously, that's important as we go forward, but also your associate and employee safety.
Completely. Yes. I mean, the founding principle of the company is all about putting people first. So we always have said that if you take care of your associates, they'll take care of the guests and the guests will come back. That's been kind of the underlying business model since the beginning. And so it was really kind of groundbreaking. Last summer, we look back on it now and think like, it's almost a no-brainer. Of course, like you would wear masks and everything, but at the time in July when it was announced, it was really forward thinking for the industry. And it was in the spirit of, we're all in this together, but we're trying to protect each other, and whatever we can do to, again, allow our guests to feel more comfortable, but also reinforce the fact that we take health and safety so much as a priority, and that we really want to make sure our guests feel comfortable, however that might look like. We're doing everything on our part to make it happen.
That's fantastic. So I think maybe picking up on some of the themes that were hit on in the last session. So we're seeing a lot of positive signals, things like the vaccine rollout, and that's increasing by the day. There are signals out there that say that there's pent-up travel demand. There's an uptick in consumer confidence as it relates to travel. So how are you anticipating and really preparing for this eventual resurgence in travel?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, as I mentioned, like our brand standards and our cleanliness and safety protocols are certainly paramount. Like we want to make sure that we have those visible cues, but that they're being demonstrated on a regular basis, and that our guests are prepared. They know kind of the expectations going in. So everything from the time that they're planning and booking a trip to the pre-arrival communications to the on-property experience. And then again, hopefully having something that really feels positive and resonates with them, so that when they're wanting to rebook or that they're sharing with others, that they really have a good story to tell, and that they've had that sentiment that they're more inclined to come back again in the future. I think also just in general, it's about like flawless execution of the basics, right? Like meeting our guests where they are. So, making accommodations for all of the things that maybe we've had in place before, but like are now just going to be even more elevated. So a lot of our technology with like the keyless entry, or you can have the option, like you don't even have to have a contact at the arrival at the check-in desk, that you can like get your key downloaded to the app. You can go directly to the room, or you could message through the app for housekeeping requests, that you could have opportunities to order your in-room dining or your room service, like just making sure that we're still providing, like, again, that high-tech, high-touch service model, and that our guests are feeling like our associates, which is, I think, a very natural tendency. They care. They want to make sure that they're comfortable with their stay and that they feel like they're being taken care of. And so that when the guests come, they don't have to really think about much. It's all sort of available for them, and that they're there and that they're hopefully, again, having a great experience.
Yeah, and maybe I want to double down on something that you had mentioned, which I found really interesting, which was that, there's this talk of contactless, and obviously that's important given some of the safety concerns, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not personalized. And the experience and those moments of truth and those touch points there's still an opportunity to create personalization. And I think that's something that you guys have really focused on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our associates are just, I would say, tremendous detectives. Like they're really good at like getting information without people like offering too much. And so they do a great job of just making sure that the little elements and experiences and touch points, like they feel really personalized, that it's not something like, oh, we just happen to have like extra of this, or this is something I'm going to do to be nice. It's like, it's actually through a very authentic and genuine kind of connection. And so I think a lot of our properties, I can think of examples when I was working on the JW Marriott brand, where I hear stories like it's almost expected if you check in and you mention it's a anniversary or birthday that you're celebrating, but if somebody happens to find that out ahead of time, and then there's a special amenity or gift, or even if it's recognized at like the on-property restaurant or something, like it's just a nice touch. And I think a lot of our hotels do a good way of making the guests feel uniquely recognized and special, but also in a way that's it's not burdensome. It's just actually like a true pleasure and an opportunity for our associates to shine and to do something that they feel like is really unique too.
Yeah, it's those little moments of delight that
Exactly. Yeah.
that are really human in nature, and they don't have to be big things. They can be small little things, and they make a big difference.
Exactly. We always used to talk about like, I mean, it sounds obvious, but sometimes like, you know, if you're waiting for a car to pull up as you're checking out of the hotel, like have cold towels available or have bottles of water if it's a really hot day, or when people are arriving, like, you know, give them like a little cloth or something so that they can kind of wipe the airport experience off of them or whatever it is. So it's just these little thoughtful gestures and small touches that in accumulation, they really go a long way. And I think that guests remember that and that they sort of expect that elevated level of service, but it's really foundational at the end of the day. It's about getting those basics right too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit broader about just, you know, I think one thing that's been interesting, we talked about that travel always had a larger meaning. So travel just isn't about travel. It's always had a larger meaning. And, you know, it's quite possible that the meaning of travel is going to change or has changed during this time. And so what are your thoughts on this? And, you know, maybe this is kind of a continuation of the previous discussion, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was curious to hear Angelique talk a lot about the bucket list trips, because I think we've seen some of that people are definitely planning still for that next big trip, like something that they might have wanted to take 5-10 years from now. It's more immediate. So once the timing again is right, that they're taking advantage of it. But I also think that people are going to be a little bit more intentional with their travel. Like they're going to not necessarily try to go, like if they go to Europe and do 7 countries in 7 days, like it might be a little bit slower, a little bit more focused and deliberate, and certainly I think a little bit more introspective. So people might just be more appreciative of the opportunity to travel. And we've seen this kind of shift towards what I would call the intentional or the slow travel, where people, they pace themselves, like again, that maybe they take a longer route, it's a little bit more scenic, or of course, like we could talk forever about the blending of the business and leisure travel, but how people are taking more extended time to really, you know, have some time maybe for work, but also blend it with like tacking on a few extra days to spend with family members or friends and everything there too. And I definitely think she touched on a really good point about related to reunion travel. Like everybody is just excited to be with their loved ones. And like, I completely agree that people are comfortable, but they're kind of experiencing some of that virtual meeting or Zoom fatigue. So having the opportunity, nothing replaces in-person connections. And so we know that whether it's a chance to go visit extended family members, or at our hotels, we host so many conferences and meetings and events. People miss being with other people, and you can't ever replace that in-person connection. So having the opportunity to really foster those moments, I think people will just be more appreciative of them in general, and they'll hopefully, again, not take it for granted, but just want to lean into it and take advantage of the opportunity to do so in the future.
Yeah, I mean, inherently, we're social creatures, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We need that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard somebody say, you know, a little while ago, I can't remember where I read it, but it was something along the lines of, you know, travel used to be for escape, and really now it's more for connection, and that's connection either to others or connection to yourself, which kind of goes along the lines of the introspection and slowing down and being more intentional.
Definitely. I mean, I think in general, people are just more appreciative. Like you think about it from nature and just the recognition that like we have air that's easier to breathe, or that we're able to see like some amazing celestial skies, or not have it be as crowded with people on the streets or like car congestion and everything. So I think there's also just this idea of like kind of returning to nature, right? Like that we're just going back to our roots and being a little bit more appreciative of the gift of the world around us and what we can give back in turn.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in your role in particular, you mentioned this at the top of the session. You mentioned that in your role and your team's role, you're really looking at insights and trying to have a pulse on your guests and travelers in general. So what are some of the things that you've seen? What are some of the new consumer trends or needs or behaviors, either that you didn't expect and were sort of a surprise, or things that you're seeing that are thematic?
So I think definitely in terms of behaviors, like I touched on briefly earlier about the leisure trips, like the blending of different trip purposes, that whereas before people might have tacked on like an extra day or two, now because of the extended breaks that people are taking, or even temporary relocations. Like you've heard the stories of some of these different countries that are offering like temporary work visas or opportunities for people to, scoop up a house for $1 in different markets and stuff. I think people are really being a little bit more deliberate with their trips and trying to blend the experience so that it's that balance. And I think in general, just focusing on their personal and mental well-being has been tremendous. It's been really important. So I would say leaning into some of the more well-being focused travel, that's something that we've seen pick up quite a bit, that people are thinking through, okay, how can I incorporate like physical exercise or mindfulness experiences? And our hotels, I have to say, they've just done an amazing job like pivoting and repurposing different spaces. Like we have family yoga sessions, or there are hotels where they've converted old rooms into like spas and sanctuaries and everything. So it's really been interesting to see, like, again, what guests are wanting and requesting and how we've been able to accommodate or pivot accordingly. And then I think also just in general, like one thing that I think is so important for our guests is like, feeling very comfortable when they come to the properties in general. And that is all through all elements of the journey. So from the moment that they arrive, that they've had this good experience, to the times when they're enjoying some of our food and beverage outlets, and just making sure that like we're offering opportunities for like workarounds. So I think some of our hotels, again, have done an amazing job when it comes to redesigning some of their guest rooms to be private dining spaces, or having like evening social events where we have like cocktail carts or places where people can choose to have like a happy hour kind of experience in like a special off property location. And then just also being able to give some partnerships like for local areas too. If they want to leave the hotel, we have this great program. It's called Eat Around Town, where guests can go, they can earn Marriott Bonvoy points through local establishments and partnerships and restaurants. And I mean, we have, I don't even know if people realize this, we have like over 7,000 hotels globally. So multiply that times like the communities in which those properties are located, and you've got lots of chances to really enjoy your points, but also like, spread your spend or be doing stuff that would be off property as well too.
Yeah, that's a lot of hotels.
It is, it is indeed. And more growing too, which is exciting. So, yeah.
So you hit on a couple of themes, and I want to maybe double click on a few of them. So the whole notion of transformation of spaces, and I think that's a really interesting thing that we've seen not just in the travel industry and obviously with Marriott, but it's been a common theme. Like so restaurants, as an example, have had to rethink their floor plans, have had to rethink their entire sort of service delivery system, and so it's also created an opportunity for different businesses, different industries to really rethink their spaces and things that are not being used. How do you repurpose them to really serve your customer? So I thought that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a little bit about your partnership. So I think that I'd love to learn a little bit more about your partnerships and sort of what your perspective is on how partnerships will evolve going forward, given that there isn't, I think, a single entity that owns sort of the full end-to-end customer experience, but there's a lot of alliances and partnerships, and so I'm curious to hear your thoughts and perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many different types of partnerships. Like, I think some of the ones that really resonate with people right now are the ones where, again, they're drawing meaningful connections or experiences to, or that it's relevant or applicable to what they're doing every day. So I think about like last summer, we launched a program where you could earn, I believe it was like 6 times the amount of points for groceries, and again, it was through our credit card program. So it was meeting people, our guests, where they are and what they're using their different points on or their credit card dollars with at this point. Then we also have like our Marriott signature brand has partnered with TED. And so like, I think some of the talks that are out there are those meaningful moments or connections or experiences, just taking the chance for people to feel like travel really enriches the soul. And when they're traveling, people feel a little bit more maybe like just open to new experiences and to opportunities. And so if it's that intellectual stimulation or learning, like I think that's a great way for people to feel like, okay, I can be more balanced and full of life and present in the moment. And I think that some of that comes through in those little moments or those different pockets of inspiration that we try to activate through partnerships and everything there too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I think that hits on a couple of themes, but it hits on this notion that rethinking travel. I mean, because travel, the partnerships that you're forging are different than they were even several years ago,
right.
and it's more about learning and these really meaningful and intimate experiences. I think that's really interesting.
Definitely, and I think the balance is now like it's a little different because like you touched on, Jesus, like with our spaces and the redesign of like you can't necessarily always do it in community or with others. So thinking through how do you benefit individually, but then share that out collectively. And so how does that balance occur where you're able to do something for yourself, but you also can share it with others, even if you have to be a little bit more socially distant or physically not in the same space, that there's still a way to feel that enriching experience too.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things that you hit on a little bit earlier was this notion of going back to nature, and that's been a trend that we've seen and seems like it's going to be here for a while. What are you doing, or what is Marriott doing to really maybe position itself to be able to offer those types of experiences or be a part of that experience?
There are a lot of different things that our hotels have done. We have a partnership like where we do tours and activities, or there are off-property chances where people can take advantage of like different immersions or experiences. Like some of our properties have even farms where you can go and you can like pick your own food, or you can be like almost like a farmer for the day kind of thing, which is pretty cool. I think also just like taking advantage of the local surroundings and the area. Like, so people, again, when they go to a hotel, they don't want to stay at a hotel the whole time. So having the chance to like experience some of those off-property locations, like I can think of one of our hotels in Thailand that has a great partnership with a local aquarium, and they do a activation where they actually bring kids who are staying at the hotel to the site, and they teach them about all the different animals that are there. Or even just, I think it was the Ritz-Carlton down in Amelia Island. They have an on-site marine biology course too, which is pretty cool for families and everything. So it's trying to like bring in some of the elements of like what's around them, but to the experience at the hotel or even off the hotel if it's a partnership or a local activation too. But yeah, I think that in general, people just, they want to feel like tangible, like tactile kind of sensorial experiences. And so really getting back to your roots and back into nature, I think goes through all the different elements of like earth, wind, air, fire, like everything you can kind of see. And it even just comes through in like our design and our strategy. A lot of times, like we have like those sensorial elements that you can like, you know, touch on the walls, or like the fire pits that are located there, or the beautiful vista with the sea or the ocean that you're looking at from a balcony. So I think just people are feeling a little bit more appreciative and intentional with that nature perspective as well.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned, you know, the being a farmer for the day. And I went to this farm in Pescadero a couple of years ago, and it was a goat farm, and you can go and pet the farms. And I was thinking that'd be a great experience through one of your hotels.
Totally. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, goat yoga was like all the rage, right? Like, and one of my colleagues just sent something the other day that like there is a local alpaca farm here in DC, and you can bring people there. I mean, it's just amazing that, you know, the connection to animals and to nature, and it's just really important to people. So definitely.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So one of the things that I'd love to maybe spend a little bit of time on is this notion of understanding your traveler and understanding your guest and understanding customer sentiment. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what can brands do to get closer to their customer, to really understand what are their needs, and then what role does data have in this?
I think a lot of it is just kind of what I was saying earlier, going back to the basics, like really listening to your customers, understanding what's important to the guests, and paying attention. And I think this comes through, like, we have great resources that we can utilize from social media where we're getting kind of that real-time feedback, like as people are staying at our hotels, but also just looking at the data, like the post-stay surveys, and looking at, what worked well, what could be opportunities for improvement. We always love it when our guests are recognizing special associates or they share an experience that they've had, and just really paying attention to what's important and making sure that we're doing all the right things. So it's a combination of having like the signage in the right place, or the high tech service that's available, or just ensuring that like we're adapting and adjusting. So like I think all of our restaurants pivoted really quickly early on to like offer QR codes, like instead of having like, tactile menus, or having different technology. Like the app was able to have like housekeeping requests on demand where people could be messaging through the app and the interface so that they could request services. And I think a lot of it is just, recognizing like sort of what are the patterns or the trends that are emerging and the common themes, and therefore like just ensuring that we're doing the right kind of communication, that we're setting the expectations so that our guests are understanding like this is what this day is going to be about, this is what they can expect to have happen. If they have any issues, like this is how they can contact us, or we're here for you. Like it's really just about getting the basics right and making sure that we're listening to them and meeting them where they're at and delivering this flawless execution wherever we can.
That's fantastic. So I want to maybe pivot a bit, and we talked about partnerships a bit, and I think one of the things that you and I had a conversation earlier this week, and you were mentioning that you're a founding board member for the Women Leading Travel and Hospitality Group. And so I found this really interesting and fascinating, and I'm wondering if you might be able to share a little bit more there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you for the opportunity. So Women Leading Travel and Hospitality is a relatively recent group. We just launched in January. So if people are looking for it, they can find more information on LinkedIn. We have some social channels through Instagram. We do a newsletter that comes out once a week on Tuesday mornings, actually. And it's really a network of different women throughout the different hospitality industries. So of course, myself, who come from the hotel space, there are a couple other women leaders who are from other competitor companies or peer companies. But then it's also about representation from airlines, from transportation services. We have some relative startups, like where people are working on things that are related to like RVs and alternative accommodations. There's a woman who is running the innovation center at DFW at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. So, I mean, it's a whole gamut of different experiences. But one thing that I've really appreciated, I've been involved with the group now for about 5 months. We have peer groups where we talk about all sorts of different topics. So what we're seeing in our respective industries and sectors, but then also like, what are some of the challenges that we're all kind of facing in this remote environment? Or how are we handling performance evaluations this year? Or even just like, what does it mean to be a really effective woman leader? And so it's a whole gamut of different topics, but I think that there's a tremendous amount of respect and appreciation for people's different viewpoints and their input. And it's just a great way to network with other people. So I would really encourage people to be looking at the website. We have an event actually on next Thursday, which will be February 25th. And so they can participate in that, but it's a relatively nominal membership entry point for people to join. And it's just a great network and a way for people to really be coming together from different industries and different perspectives.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that there's this spirit of partnership and it's not competitive. And, I think that was a topic that was hit on in the previous session as well, that I think this time has really shown that there's, I think the industry is stronger as a whole when everybody comes together and partners, and it's much more collaborative.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with a lot of the different groups. Like, I know in particular, like the U.S. Travel Association has been really pivoting to get all of the different sectors involved in terms of like plan your vacation day, or think about like that next trip. And so it spans the gamut, and it goes through all the different stages of that customer journey experience.
Yeah, that's great. So I have a few more questions, and then I think we should probably pivot over to the question, the Q&As from the audience.
Okay.
But one question that I have for you, and I think this is, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. So what are you optimistic about? What are you most excited about looking forward?
I, in general, am optimistic that travel will come back, and I think it's going to come back with a vengeance. Like I like to use the term revenge travel, that people are willing and excited, but they're ready. And so, like, even again, if it's taken a little bit longer than they anticipated, I think people will be certainly more appreciative of it. I think in general, I'm optimistic that people are going to be a little bit nicer. Like they'll be a little bit more patient. Like I would love to see that the next time you get on a plane, that maybe the people that are 10 rows back don't rush down the aisle, that they wait their turn, or that people are a little bit more accommodating and generous to each other in terms of the overall experience. But I think people will just be more grateful for it. Like we know that travel is such a gift, and that people, I think it, like Angelique said it well, like we won't take it for granted. We'll just be a little bit more appreciative. And so I'm optimistic that every time that people travel going forward, they're just going to realize what a tremendous gift it is and what an experience it is to be able to do it, whether it's personally or professionally or some combination in between.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. One of the things that we've seen probably over the last year is also the approach that companies have had to taking days off and to travel, and just a lot more flexibility, and acknowledging that it's an important thing, and people's well-being is important. And it's been a really rough period, and it's going to be there's going to be challenges as we go forward. And I think if I'm optimistic and hopeful that companies value that going forward, or continue to value that.
I agree. I definitely think so. And I've seen even just among our leadership, people taking advantage of opportunities to have those blended experiences, or to say, I want to be able to do something for a time period where I'm spending time with my family or my friends, and then be able to be online during the day. But that balance is really critical.
Yeah. So I know we're wrapping up. Can I ask a few of the Q&As? Okay, perfect. So one of them is, how has your loyalty strategy been impacted over the last 6 months?
Sure. So we've made a couple different changes to our loyalty program. And if people are curious to know a little bit more, they can certainly go on our Marriott Bonvoy and see about like some of the requirements as it relates to status and tiers and elite nights and all of that. But I mean, at the end of the day, of course, we want people to love our brands, to be those brand ambassadors, to have great experiences. And so I would say the strategy has been more just focused on what I was talking about a little bit earlier in terms of the opportunity to earn points, like different ancillary revenue sources, but also we want to give our guests the chance to burn points, to like use their points to actually like take advantage of those redemption stays, to really plan that next big trip, or be excited for it. So it's just more been a shift in terms of where the spend has been, but in general, like I think our Bonvoy program has been consistently recognized as a really amazing program with wonderful perks and privileges, and members just love it. So we want to keep that train going, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. One last question. So what is the pivot at Marriott that you're most proud of in the last year?
The last year, I would say the authenticity that people are showing. Like, I think that people are really just so genuine in terms of their experiences now. Like, I mean, I think that it's a little bit vulnerable, but people have shown like, their home lives, their, real lives, and how it's intersected with like their professional lives. But I think a great example of going back to what we were kind of talking about at the beginning with Arnie and our CEO was displaying that empathy, like from the get-go, and really acknowledging and recognizing that people are going through roller coaster of emotions, like the ups, the downs, the peaks, the valleys. And so just having the courage and the conviction for people to say, like, you know what, I can't be on a call at 6 o'clock at night because that's the time that I put my kid down for a bath, or 7 a.m. for a call. It just, again, it's not going to work for me because that's the time that my husband and I get to read the newspaper together and have coffee, like little things like that. But it's showing that rawness and authenticity, but also the expectation that people just will continue to give it their all, and that everybody is working together, and we're not going to let go of kind of the short and long-term plans, but we want to be supporting each other in however that looks like.
Yeah, we've really sort of brought down the facade that everything is flawless, right? It's not.
Exactly. Right. It's real. It's here. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I think we're are we up on time, Annie?
Just up on time, but I'm so glad that you got those last couple of questions in there. Thank you so much. And Christine, thank you. I mean, I think that realness and authenticity and empathy that everybody's kind of grown. Not that we didn't have it before, but it was very different, right? Now it's just completely all blown wide open, and we can really see each other for the human beings that we are. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, and for sharing the term revenge travel, which I'm going to be using from now on, because I have my Peloton that I tried to cover with plant. But I'm going to get my revenge body, and then I'm going to get my revenge travel on as soon as I can. So
love it. No, thank you so much for the opportunity, Annie. And thank you, Jesus, for being a great moderator. And I'm just really excited to be here. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Our next session is going to be with Dana Lawrence, Managing Director of Global Brand Marketing at American Airlines. And she's going to be moderated by Anna Rosenblatt, who's a Managing Partner, Strategy Director at MediaCom. Everybody make sure that you continue to use the chat. You continue to ask questions to our wonderful panelists. And here come, hi guys. Hi Dana. Hi Anna.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Annie.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. All right, I'm going to hand over the virtual mic over to you guys, and I will be back at the end of your session.
Great.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Annie. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'm Anna Rosenblatt with MediaCom, where I lead strategy across a few different brands, among which is American Airlines. I'm incredibly lucky to work with Dana and her team. So with that, I'm thrilled to introduce Dana Lawrence. Dana leads global brand marketing for American Airlines. And Dana, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. Really excited to talk about the opportunity, the future of travel. Obviously, something that American Airlines is incredibly passionate about, that I'm incredibly passionate. American Airlines for almost 2.5 years, and lead global brand marketing, as Anna said, lead the majority of all of the communications, brand equity, advertising, media, sponsorships, activation, our own channels, aa.com, the content, email and CRM, insights, etc. So yeah, really love working on the gamut of marketing related activity at American Airlines.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Super excited to have you here today. So what we're going to do is have some questions, some topics prepared for you. I would love to get your perspective on the future of travel, why we're both here today. And then we will leave some time at the end for Q&A. So as Annie mentioned, everyone, please feel free to submit questions through the widget, and we will definitely get to as many as we can at the end of our chat.
Great.
So to get started, Dana, obviously it's been quite a year. Even a year ago, I don't think any of us expected quite the impact that COVID would have, and just how it would turn the world upside down, and especially the travel world as it touches on your business. But one of the things that actually impressed me the most is how companies, including American Airlines, including the entire travel and airline industry, were able to adapt and innovate in response to the changing environment, the changing regulations, changing consumer expectations, and quite frankly, how you had to do that, unfortunately, with very constrained resources. So could you talk a bit about that? How did American Airlines adapt from a business perspective, from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, I mean, as we have said so many times throughout this entire experience, that it's really been an unprecedented situation, but really no better way to describe it than it truly has been unprecedented. And, in many respects, we had to do almost a 180 turn, of our policies. We had to do it quickly. A lot of our policies had to change in reaction to government policies, CDC, as well as things that we needed to do as a company to make sure that, our customers had peace of mind when they traveled, that they felt safe traveling. And so, I think as we look to those changes and what we needed to do, the first thing was we had to focus on the customer, and where were they at the point? What were some of their barriers to travel? How could we make them feel more comfortable? So, we instituted our clean commitment, and that was really focusing on all those things that were important. Mask regulations, highlighting HEPA filters, something we'd already had, but no customers knew anything about. Touchless travel, instituting a partnership with Purell, getting GBAC certification, which, if you don't know, it's the Global Biorisk Advisory Council that assists all of our policies and procedures. So many of those things that we really had to get ahead of as we thought about what was important to our customers during this time frame. And then from a business standpoint, we really had to focus on how can we drive revenue and how can we reduce costs, and understanding what the environment was. From an operations side, we had to reduce our schedule, and we focused a lot of flights more on cargo, something that we'd always had that side of the business. It just hadn't really been the biggest priority, but especially, you thought about it in the March timeframe where things really significantly declined. That became a bigger focus for us as we, figured out how to drive revenue. And as a result of all of these changes, our communications had to change. We had a full marketing plan built out for 2020. We'd worked on it, since probably July or previously of 2019. And, all of that had to change. The advertising, the activation, even down to every single image that we had on our website, for A.com. We needed to make sure that every picture was showing someone in a mask, something that we didn't have. So, I think it was just all about perseverance and, figuring out how to really make sure that our customers felt good about American Airlines.
Absolutely. No, and all the things you just touched on. I mean, the HEPA filters, I myself, beyond working with you guys, didn't really know much about it. And now when I went to the dentist a few weeks ago, the thing I was most excited to hear was that they have HEPA filters installed now in the office. And I actually knew what that was thanks to you. But no, it's interesting what you said from a cargo perspective, from the business perspective, right? You can't move people anymore. So now you start moving things and you really lean into that. And you had to be agile and adapt. And from a marketing perspective, like you said, a lot of things obviously had to change. The masks, that huge debate with the Super Bowl a week ago, right? About ads that were filmed with and without masks. So to that point, do you want to talk about any of the initiatives that might have been planned for 2020, which then had to be reimagined or pivoted, and then just how you got back into market with that first brand campaign last spring?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, we had to change all of our plans, and we had a major brand campaign that was planned to launch in 2020. Is something we had worked on, significantly. We hadn't done major brand equity communications at American Airlines for a while, so it was something we were really excited about and had put a lot of focus and effort into. But we also knew that this just wasn't the right time to launch this type of communications. We really just had to set that aside. But that being said, I think we'd spent so much time in 2019 really focused and doing a deep dive into consumer insights and really understanding customers' relationship to travel, and as part of that, we identified some really timeless insights about travel, about flights, in general, what consumers thought. So we really had a rich foundation to build from. And so it was really easy for us to pivot. We had a timely expression. We had all of those timeless insights, and then that launch that we were going to do in 2020 was our timely expression, and we felt great about it. But when the environment significantly changed, our timely expression had to change as well, and so did our communications. So that was something where, luckily, because of the insights, I think we could make that pivot. And so that really resulted in our first, video, our first advertising right at the beginning of COVID. We shut down, as many others did, for a couple of weeks in that, late Feb, March timeframe, where we really kind of realized, wow, how significant of an impact COVID was going to have on our world. You know, and at that point, as we were rethinking, how do we get back into marketing? What do we want to focus on? There were a lot of questions at the time of really whether airlines should be flying at all. Was that a responsible thing for us to be doing? Why were we doing that? And so that was really our first foray back into marketing and back into advertising, was answering the question, why do we fly? And we talked about how the fact that, you know, in our 90 plus years, you know, that we'd weathered good times, we'd weathered bad times, but that we'd always persevered and continued to fly. And when we said, why do we fly? And we said, we fly because people need to get home. There were a lot of repatriation efforts at that point for international, for people who were working in different places. You know, we talked about the fact that we fly because life-saving equipment needs to get to the people who need it most. And that is kind of reflective of some of our cargo efforts. And, you know, we said, everyone is doing their part to keep the world moving. When you think about all of the, you know, amazing frontline workers and all of the medical workers, and we said, they're doing such a major part, but we want to do what we can to help. What is our part? And our part was to keep the world moving, you know, both people and cargo. And, you know, most importantly, at the end of the day, we said, you know, why do we fly? And we said, you are why we fly. And so that was really the impetus for a new tagline for American Airlines, you are why we fly. And we found that it really, you know, resonated both externally with customers, but also with internally and with our team members. And it was kind of a rallying cry that people could really get behind, that, you know, our team members take this responsibility of flying people so seriously and with so much care and so much emotion. And that really brought it to life. So, you know, it was just kind of a situation where I think we took a bad situation and really tried to find the positive in it. And, you know, it led us to a very authentic place. And I think communication with our customers.
Absolutely. You know, and I love that campaign. And I love the duality of it, like you just said, resonating internally and externally. And it's also speaking from the brand and from the consumers too, right? It's why does American fly? This is why, but it's also recognizing why do the consumers need to fly, right? And
Absolutely.
so that you is so dual. And I just love that aspect of it. And I love what you said about the insights, right? Timeless insights. Just reinforces how important those are, how important understanding your consumer is, and really understanding what matters. Because if you only have insights that are timely for the given moment, then if something changes, you're out of luck, right? But by really having that deeper understanding, you're better able to be agile and to pivot like that. And so I think insights are more important than ever, especially in a year like the past. So is there anything you were surprised to learn over the past year? Any new insights, anything you were surprised to learn or to discover, whether it was about the consumer or about the company internally as well?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I was surprised, but really, you know, really pleased of really showing how, you know, there's a book, The Adversity Challenge, you know, and it really speaks to the fact that people can overcome so much, and that sometimes the best work, the best ideas can come out of adversity. And I really think this past year was definitely a testament to that, because we were kind of forced to think differently, very agilely, you know, and with a lot of flexibility and a lot of change. And I think it gave us the opportunity for so much more innovation and to really think differently. I mean, even just from an internal perspective, it really, you know, enabled us to collaborate a lot more closely. Not that we hadn't collaborated, but I don't think we had been forced to do it in such a efficient manner, especially when budgets were really, really tight. And we all were focused on one key goal. And so that collaboration, it really enabled us to try some new things and really think differently. You know, I mean, example, we did a lot more promotions this year. We just did one in January, American Daily Deals. And for 2 weeks, we did a different promotion every day. We haven't done that type of work in years. It was really something new and different, and we learned a lot from it. Things that will carry on. Certain things we said, yep, tried that, not going to do that again. And others that we said, this is a new best practice for us going forward. You know, and we just different ways of working. I know we said earlier that our clean commitment, that was something that was a big focus. If you had told me, you know, a year prior how much time I was going to spend on talking about cleaning and HEPA filters, I would have said no way.
Yeah.
And one of the funny things is that we have a number of sports sponsorships.
Yeah.
And we've done some great work and activations and promotions for people to fly the really ardent fans to games and a lot of different fun things. And we actually pivoted and we leveraged those relationships, and we did some online and social media, et cetera, with the Dallas Cowboys and with the LA Rams, and it was all about reassurance and how people felt more comfortable traveling. We communicated clean commitment. We communicated how, we fly them to games and what it means and how they feel great flying American Airlines. And it just shows a different way, that something we never would have done a year before. And yet we could pivot and leverage those relationships in a totally different way, but in something that was timely and relevant for where we are today.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you had asked me 2 years ago if I thought we'd ever be featuring the Rams or talking about the Rams somehow about cleaning or flying in general, I would have said, no way. What are you even talking about? That's not how we do the marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's great. And I love what you said about the collaboration as well. So can you maybe build on that a bit more and expand in terms of cross-functional collaboration? Obviously so important. Everyone knows that. We strive for that in general every day. But how did you really kind of infuse that more this year and respond so quickly and work more together? Because obviously teams often have silos, and there's also working internally as well as, like you said, with all your partners across the board. So how did that come about? Was it just everyone coming together for that greater goal? Or were there any processes or adjustments you had to make to be able to work together like that?
Yeah, I think it was, it's a little mix of both. It was partnerships with our external partners, people like MediaCom, as well as a lot more partnership with the different groups. I mean, for example, marketing and our revenue management teams. We've always worked together, of course, but we were really lockstep together in a way that we haven't been before, because you just couldn't operate in these silos and be as effective and efficient as we need to be in a time frame where we really needed to reduce our cash burn and try and drive revenue in new and different ways than we had in the past. And so, yeah, we had different groups. We had really different groups at all levels that we have instituted, where we were not only sharing up-to-date information, we were brainstorming, we were ideating, we were sharing data in a different way of how we drive results. And, that really led to some best practices and some things that we are continuing, into 2021. And I know we will continue past the pandemic. And so I think that's part of the, reinvention and innovation that comes out of this type of experience. No one would ever wish to have a pandemic. No one would ever wish for, our revenue to drop so significantly, our bookings to drop, for people not to be able to travel or feel comfortable traveling. That being said, it really led us some different thinking that I think will make us stronger. I think it will enable us to deliver better for our customers in the future, and make travel a better experience, because we've really had to collaborate on a totally different level than we have before.
No, absolutely. And that rings so true, especially what you said about the data sharing and just the coming together and really breaking down those barriers. So have absolutely seen that on our end as well. And it's exciting. Like you said, you wouldn't wish for it, but it's exciting that now you have a new way of going forward, that once we get through to the other side of this, we'll stick around. And to that point, sticking around, so a lot of changes were made across the board: business operations, the in-flight experience, flexibility and no change fees. You talked about the clean commitment. A lot of these were obviously driven by the immediate needs of the pandemic, right? So the immediate needs, the immediate demands on the consumer side. Are there changes that you think are going to persist, ones that will become a permanent new way of doing things for the industry or for the brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of them we just talked about was our clean commitment, and that's not something that we are going to, reverse or go back on. I think that's just table stakes going forward. Mask regulations, they may or may not change over time. We will see. But, all of those different areas, all of the different things that we instituted as part of our GBAC certification, those will continue on. Those are going to be expectations from customers that they will have going forward, the level of cleaning that we're doing, all of those things, it just becomes table stakes. If you think about flexibility, we, along with many other airlines, instituted no change fees.
Yeah.
And that's something that's going to continue. Once customers have gotten used to that type of travel, and that way of booking travel, and that is an expectation that they will have going forward. And so that's something that we're going to continue, that I think just makes the travel journey and the travel experience better for our customers. And so that's always something we strive to do, is to make continuous improvements for our customers. And so, they feel better about American Airlines, that they want to fly more with us, et cetera. And, just how, if you think back to 9/11 and how the TSA protocols and the check-ins, that wasn't something we really did before, but now that's just how you travel. And so I think some of those things will continue on. As I think forward to, what's the future of travel, so some of the things that we have been doing prior to COVID that we're doing during COVID in a bigger way, I think we will continue to ramp up. One of those is the idea of contactless travel. We have really built that over time, and that was something we were working on regardless of COVID, but we have definitely ramped up, and I think we will continue with more innovation in the future. So, just how you can use the app. You can check in, for your flight at home. You can download an electronic boarding pass. You can go online to aa.com and see what are the latest travel requirements. If you need COVID testing, you can go online and order a testing kit. You can download Verifly, which is a mobile health passport that you can put in all of your travel requirements. Those are things that are needed today. But as you think going forward, we have touchless kiosks where you can get your bag, tagged without touching the kiosk. And going forward, like, we're already doing tests with biometrics, where, you can use mobile ID technology to drop off your bag. And later this year, you'll be able to do mobile ID technology to use at TSA checkpoints. If you want to enter one of our lounges in the Admirals Club without taking your ID out of the wallet. So those are things that are just going to continue as we move forward. That idea of touchless, which, it solves two purposes. I mean, most importantly, I would say it makes it more convenient for our travelers and our customers, but also in today's day and age with COVID, where people don't want those extra touches, it becomes even more important. But those are things I think will absolutely continue to build.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And you already touched on the other thought I was going to ask you about is the consumer expectations, right? And how those go hand in hand with what you're doing on the business perspective. And what you said is true. Once you offer something, it's hard to take it back, right? You can't rewind and say, we're not going to be as clean anymore. Or we're not going to be as flexible anymore. So it goes both ways, though, in terms of the consumer expectations and what they now expect and demand of the brand. But I think your point about 9/11 and security, in the other direction, it's what do we expect of consumers now, right? And there might be adjustments that they need to make that going through security. Now we take it for granted. Now it's kind of assumed. You build that into your time at the airport. You build that into how you approach packing your bags. But you know that that's going to be something that's not going to change. And it goes both ways in terms of what we expect from consumers and have them change their behavior, and then what they require from us going forward. So is there anything we're going to expect from consumers and make them do differently?
Oh gosh, I think it's just continuing to understand and reinforce what are the latest regulations from the government and the CDC, and realizing that those regulations, it is all about your travel experience and making sure that you as a customer are safe and you as a traveler, but also your fellow travelers. I think it's really important that this is a group experience. You need to make sure you're being respectful for not only what your experience is, but others. And so, that's why I'm sure policies will continue to change, and we will follow whatever those are and really reinforcing those with customers. We've unfortunately had people who really strongly resist wearing a mask, and that's something that, before it was something that we felt as important as an airline is something for all customers to do,
Right.
to better protect the health of our other customers, our team members. And so, those are things that we really hope that people will understand, that we're doing this with everyone's best interest in heart. And because we want to be able out there traveling, we want to take you to those great destinations you want to go to, but we have to take everyone's health and safety, most importantly, into consideration. And therefore, those are the things that we will reinforce, and then we want to make sure that's a pact with our customers, because we're in this together. And I think we all want to be traveling more than we are today, but that's going to take some work on both of our parts.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think consumers are going to understand that. I think what you said about group travel, I think before the pandemic, no one thought of it that way, right? No one thought of it as a group experience. It was all about, where do I want to go? How do I want to get there? But now people are probably a lot more cognizant of that. So talking about some of the changes you've made, would love to understand more about the challenges. So what are some of the biggest challenges still facing American? There's obviously the obvious ones that some of which you touched on already, but are there other challenges that might be facing the industry that people don't think of or just are not as aware of? And then looking out, what are some of the challenges that you expect to come up in the next year, 6 months from now, a year from now?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges that's probably not talked as much outside of the industry is just planning, and how do you plan ahead? I mean, normally, we're planning a year out for all the different things that we're going to do. And obviously this past year has taught us how quickly we need to pivot and how fluid we can be. But, the COVID situation continues to be fluid. It continues to change. And so we have to continue to adapt. And of course, we forecast our schedule, we forecast what we think our business performance will be, and our marketing plans based on where we think we will be. We've got to be prepared. We want to make sure that we are doing everything to capture the existing demand that's out there, as well as helping to inspire travel and build demand. But, the situation continues to shift. And therefore, those plans, we have them, but we also have to know that we need to be able to quickly change them as the situation changes. I mean, for example, when the CDC enacted COVID testing for international travel,
right,
we had to adjust our plans, and how much focus we put against Mexico and the Caribbean. Those were things that we had to pivot, in a matter of days and weeks, really quickly. Luckily, I think that's one of the muscles that we've really had to flex and become better at, is adjusting plans. So I think we've become so much better at that, but I foresee that's going to continue to happen all throughout 2021, as far as how we need to think about planning and how we need to think about our performance and our plans. I think it's going to be a different way of doing business, as well as thinking about what is the booking period. We've had traditional periods that are much further out. During COVID, they've been much, much shorter, not surprisingly. What does that look like going forward? We're continuing to see, and it continues to flex. So, we just have to adjust and be nimble and agile based on the situation.
Absolutely. I mean, planning is so key, and there are so many things in flux even now, right? The vaccine rollout being uneven, the new strains that are circulating, the government regulations. And like you said, you can't really plan what you don't know, and especially what you don't control. So that's definitely a good skill that you can flex now, that agility in planning. So on the
ball, but we want to be as ready as we possibly can.
Absolutely, right. You can't, exactly. You don't know, but you plan every case you can. So on the flip side of that, not the challenges, but thinking more hopefully and more optimistically, what are you most hopeful for? What do you see might be some of the biggest opportunities coming out of all this as the world recovers from COVID-19 and beyond?
Yeah. I think one of the positives that this year has really reinforced and reminded people is how important travel is, in their lives, and how much they really love it, what they love about it, what they've missed most, where they want to go next. I think we definitely know from consumers and from consumer insights, but I think we've all heard it from our family and our friends, how much they just can't wait to travel. It's one of the things that they're most looking forward to, especially if they haven't felt as comfortable traveling, whether they have health concerns or whatever the case is, you know, and where they want to travel, particularly internationally, as you know, countries open up. Domestically, luckily, we've been able to continue with our travel, which has been great. But internationally, a lot has just been closed down for us. So yeah, I think people are excited about it, and I think it's the whole journey. You know, it's not just the destination. You know, part of the fun is the planning, the thinking ahead,
100%, yeah.
preparing for it. I think maybe some people who maybe thought the flight wasn't the best part of the experience are now like, I just want to get on a plane again. You know, the actual journey while you're there, and then all the memories, you know, upon return. And I think just realizing that, you know, it's about connecting, you know, with other people. I think that, you know, this has been a consumer trend that has been building for a while now. And the fact that, you know, a lot of people have realized that experiences are more important than things. And I think that's probably something that's been reinforced over the past year, you know, that people value those experiences. And I think that that trend is just really going to continue as COVID wanes, with travel being one of those top experiences that people really value. And I think seeing that, you know, travel is not only about your personal, you know, vacation or leisure experience, and of course that's great, but that, you know, on a bigger level, travel helps connect the world. And, you know, travel is going to help the economy return as well as we go and travel to these different places. It really has a positive ripple effect. So, you know, I'm just looking forward to travel increasing for those who haven't been able to travel, to getting back out there. For those maybe who haven't been traveling, who have been traveling, but want to go to farther away destinations or see more of those family and friends that they haven't been able to. I'm just really looking forward to hopefully everyone being able to have those great experiences again.
Absolutely. I mean, personally, I can't wait to get on a plane again. I haven't been, it's almost a year now. It was actually end of February. It was my last flight, early March. So coming up on that year. But I think what you said about the whole journey is so true, because it's not just the getting there. It's not just the destination. I mean, a lot of studies have shown that the happiest moments are actually the planning stages, because people are anticipating and looking forward to the upcoming trip. And so I can only imagine just how impactful it's going to be now, every step of that journey, that first journey that people take. But some people have already been taking these journeys, right? So obviously air travel, especially, ground to a halt last spring. But since then, it's started to pick up a bit. What are you seeing from that booking perspective? Who is flying these days? How has it changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a demographic standpoint, we've seen that a younger demographic, you know, particularly 30 and below, that they are flying a lot more this past year during the pandemic. You know, they've taken advantage of the lower fares. They maybe haven't been as concerned about COVID compared to older demographics. And so that's been a great opportunity for us. It's allowed us to introduce American Airlines and our flight experience, what our travel journey is all about, to a new customer base. And so, you know, that's something that, you know, we hope that they've had a great experience with American, and that they will be future, you know, loyal travelers going forward for us. So, so yeah, you know, and booking, as I said earlier, you know, the booking period, the timeframes have changed. And we've seen how bookings have really been influenced by, you know, the number of COVID cases. As COVID cases go up, bookings go down, and vice versa. But I think now that, you know, we're starting to see that COVID cases are decreasing right now, number of vaccines are increasing. I think there's even more reason to hope. And as we get to warmer weather, that helps. So I think there's a lot of reasons for positivity, and, you know, looking forward to more bookings as the year continues and as we move forward. But, you know, we're really optimistic, and that we're going to have a bigger return, hopefully in the spring and into the summer and beyond.
Hopefully. I know we all hope for that for sure. You mentioned loyalty. So you mentioned trying to make these new travelers more loyal. And it's so fascinating how just that shift has happened, not just in demographics, but also the types of flyers you have. So what do you see as the future of loyalty in the travel space? So overall, the pandemic has really driven a lot of declines in brand loyalty just across categories, not just travel. It's driven more consumers to try new shopping behaviors, new methods, new brands. How is that playing out in travel and for airlines?
Yeah, I mean, I think loyalty will definitely continue to be an intrinsic part of travel, and part of the travel category going forward. It's become such an important part of the travel journey, really an intrinsic part for many of our customers and many of our travelers. And I think most importantly, it's a chance for us to, welcome back a lot of our Advantage members who haven't been traveling as much. Welcome them back as they start to travel in a bigger way this year, as well as driving this loyalty with a new customer base. And I think, at the end of the day, this loyalty and our Advantage program, it enables people to do more of what they love. When they fly us more, they see the benefits and, the opportunities that come from that. And it really enables you to fly more. The more you fly, the more miles you gain, the more you can use them for other travel experiences, for different flights and trips, etc. So I think it's kind of a virtuous loop and a virtuous cycle that the more travel you do, the more benefits you gain and the more travel you can go forward. And for those of us and for many of our customers who really love and value travel, that just becomes a critical part of the picture. So I know a lot of our Advantage members haven't been flying as much this year. We're excited to welcome back. We're so glad to have these new travelers. And I think we're just going to continue to build on loyalty going forward.
Absolutely. And I'm sure people are so excited to make up for all that lost travel, hopefully with a lot more of it. So on that note, do you think the way people, or more importantly, the reasons why people are going to be traveling are going to look different in the future? Is there going to be maybe a shift in priorities and top travel destinations, types of travel, why people are traveling once they do restart?
Yeah, we'll have to see over time. I mean, I definitely think right now, the idea of visiting family and friends is such a critical part of travel. I think that's what people have missed the most. We did an ad earlier this year during the summer, and it was called "The Best Places Are People." And it really built upon this idea that when you looked at insights, what did people miss the most? And why did they most want to travel? And it really was to reconnect with family and friends. So it wasn't necessarily about the destination or having that great vacation, but it's not about going to Hawaii. It was about going to see grandma. It's about going to see your best friend.
Absolutely.
That type of thing. Or if it's even with your immediate family, maybe you've been stuck at home and it's about having that experience together, getting to a national park, having a change environment, but reconnecting as a family in a new and different way. So I think that will continue to be important. Obviously, corporate travel, we
My next question.
coming back. I mean, obviously that's really taken a hit, over the past year. But I think that's something that, it will gradually and steadily increase, as travel comes back in a bigger way.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to ask you to build on that last point about business and just corporate travel, how you see that evolving and really how is American engaging with that traveler. And then I see Annie just joined us. So I think we're going to be only a few minutes left. We'll do a few quick audience Q&As and if we have time for that. So on the corporate travel side, Dana, how is that changing?
I mean, the large corporations, I think for anyone who looks at those, it has really been halted. I think people are trying to make sure, just like we make sure our team members are safe, they want their team members to be as safe as possible and really not to take any risks. So I think especially as the vaccine continues to roll out, as we see COVID cases increasing, we will start to see corporate travel gradually increase, first in domestic markets, and then I think over time with international. But someone recently I heard make this comment, and I thought it was a really valuable one. They said, virtual meetings, all the Zoom meetings that we've all been on and experiencing, it really makes the world a little bit smaller. I mean, I know until the pandemic, I have roommates from college that are literally all over the country. And we'd get together maybe, once a year if we were lucky. And now suddenly we've never done Zoom calls. And now we're doing that regularly. I feel so much closer to them. So I think there is this idea that virtual meetings make the world smaller, and anything that makes the world smaller actually increases travel demand. It shows you that
I love that.
I want to reinforce that connection that we've made. And so I think it'll take some time. I don't think corporate travel is going to bounce back immediately, but I do think it will grow over time. And that, at the end of the day, travel, it makes the world a smaller place. It enables connections. And, I think that's something that we will continue to do, and it will continue to grow.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And it's so true. You'd think travel expands it, but it also makes it smaller and brings us all closer. So Annie, if we have a few minutes, we'll jump to a few Q&As from the audience.
One more Q&A.
One more. Okay, perfect. So a question that came in from Henry is, what challenges did American have restarting all of those technical pieces after being somewhat dormant during COVID? What infrastructural challenges do you still see bringing some things back out of the freezer?
Yeah, I am not the best person to speak to all of the operational challenges, but definitely from an aircraft standpoint, planes are built to fly. They're not built to sit dormant. And so that is something that our operations team focused really strongly on, and making sure that our planes were kept up to date, that they were serviced, all of the technical requirements that involves. So that's a big focus, and something that we're seeing as more flights, as our schedule builds up, that's something our team is incredibly important to them. And I would say from a marketing side, from a media standpoint, we were dormant for a while, with our media, and we really used that time to enable some of the technology, some of the tracking tools that we could build up in a bigger way that would allow us to come back stronger. So I think that's just been a big focus for us at Americans overall, is during this time when in certain times we've been paused, how can we leverage this time so that when we come back stronger, we come back better, and we come back in a way that is best for our customers. So I think that's been a big focus for us.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Annie, I think you're going to tell us we're done on time. So Dana, thank you.
I wish that you weren't, though. You'll just have to come back. I've told every session that this is so interesting. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
No. I feel bad because I saw you submitted a question too, but we'll do that offline. But Dana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. It was great to be here today and talk about travel. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us, Annie. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Annie.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. Oh, that was fantastic. Okay, so our final session for today, definitely not the least, is with Liz Christofi, Global Vice President Campaign Marketing at IHG. She's going to be moderated by Mike Sadacario, VP Head of Demand at Smart Ad Server. Hi, Liz. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
Hello. Luckily, I don't have a kitty cat in my background, but I did just notice I don't use Zoom as much, so you'll forgive the change of background. Hi.
Oh, good. I like the fits within the travel theme. All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to you, and I will check in at the end of your session.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always I was worried. I didn't know what my virtual background was going to be. You never know.
I know that was something that was hysterical, though, that it does make you think and make sure that you're prepared for anything virtually these days.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Annie, for introducing us. Thank you, Brand Innovators, for inviting us here today. I'm Mike Sadacario. I work for Smart, one of the largest global independent full stack ad tech companies, working with in-house programmatic teams and agency trading desks to develop programmatic deals across premium digital and CTV publishers. But enough about me. That's it. That promise. That's the only plug. It's actually an honor to be here today and moderate this fireside chat with our special guest, Liz from IHG Hotels and Resorts. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Mike.
How's it going?
It's good. Good.
Good. Let's kick this off with a bit of an intro, just because it's the right way to do it. Can you please introduce us to you and tell us about your role at IHG before we jump into some deeper probing questions?
Sure, happy to. Again, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here this afternoon. What an amazing group of panelists too. So I'm excited to tell you a little bit about our company and the journey we've been on. But for me, I lead our global campaign marketing team. And we're really, a team that is a shared service organization that works across all aspects of marketing. So everything from commercial marketing to loyalty marketing to our brand marketing, as well as our newly launched master brand marketing and portfolio. So I really have a large scope across each part of the business, which is really helpful, but also a little bit daunting at times. But it's certainly a great opportunity for us to continue to make sure that we're creating the right guest and consumer experiences across everything that we're doing.
Thanks, Liz. So before I get into the questions, I know there's a Q&A. Usually we save it to the end. I love to ask these in the middle. So if you have a question, I might just throw it out right away. So please type your questions in.
Me on my toes.
Yeah, it's always good to disrupt it. So my first question for you, Liz, and I think it's a rather big one. We spoke the other day about your role, obviously, at IHG, and the transformational period we're obviously in as a society, and the circumstances you somehow keep finding yourself in.
I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but yeah.
Yeah, you've spent time at Kodak, where disruption was clearly all over the business, Discovery Channel during the Great Recession, and now IHG during COVID-19, and also in the midst of a complete rebrand, which we'll get into later. So my question for you is actually more of like a request, which is I'd love for you to share your thoughts on transformation in general, consistently being some a change agent, some would call you, and like the holistic transformation of the business at IHG, and how your marketing team functions as a unit throughout that. I told you it was a big one, so that's a big one.
Yeah. There's lots to unpack in that question, but I will say that it's. I was joking. It really is a blessing for me to have been through so many organizational changes through my 20-something year career, and starting with Kodak, that is a prime example of having to continuously pivot as the industry and customer landscape changed around you. And so I worked at Kodak both at the beginning, before change in digital photography really came to change and disrupt the industry, to working in LA on our entertainment imaging business when digital cinema came into play. And so being able to navigate through all of our channels and how our guests' expectations, or at the time, consumer expectations, continued to change. And then, as you mentioned, in Discovery, going from a privately held company to a publicly held company in the midst of a financial crisis and a housing crisis, up until 12 months ago with the pandemic. And so you think about each of those, I feel like I have been, to your point, almost like an athlete, priming myself for this moment in time. Someone on my team joked that I'm a change lead, so I'll take that. It's a great opportunity for us to continue to reflect on how we first react to change ourselves, because it can be so stressful. And especially when change is thrust upon you. As organizations continue to evolve and to transform to be able to meet the needs of the customers, a lot of that is in ways that we're trying to make sure that we're staying relevant. When change is thrust upon you, though, that's when you can feel like you're off your game and not sure exactly how to navigate. And so it's critical to keep your your ears to what's happening in each of the markets, to listen truly to customers. And as we've gone through this year, you've heard through so many of the panelists today that we've had to just react as quickly as possible to government shutting down, to our hotels having to shut down, for us to shut down our marketing. And we have to be prepared to be unprepared, if you will. And it's been certainly one of the most challenging times in my career, but also it's been so rewarding, because now you can also reflect on what are the things that you want to change, what are the things that you want to continue to grow, and what's life going to look like on the other side of this. So all of that to be said, I think change is a critical part of how travel now and hospitality comes out of this stronger and better than ever before.
I think we need to trademark Changely t-shirts. I think that's has to be the next thing for you. So speaking of transformation, I think we're going to talk a lot about this because IHG recently rebranded, right, from Intercontinental Hotels Group to IHG Hotels and Resorts. I'm hoping that you could share some more details about that, about the rebrand, about the narrative behind it. I have a bunch of follow-up questions for you, but maybe you could just speak to high level the rebrand.
Sure. And, we've been on this journey for a while, with IHG, and, where we are this year as we've turned the chapter on 2020 or 2020 into 2021, it's a great time for us to have a new reflection and a new perspective on our brands and our support for our owners and how our guests see us. So the rebrand was really just an opportunity for us to continue to highlight what's great about the diversity and the portfolio of our brands, being as diverse as we all are, but they each have something meaningful to say, and how they've come to life. And so I think the rebrand really just brings that to life in an elevated way, in a way that helps us have a clear and concise message for how we're uniting all of our guests, and that we're bringing back those connections that we've all longed for and that we've missed out on over the last year. And when you think through like each of our kind of new brand categories, so we put them into new brand categories to also help better describe the 16 brands that we have in our portfolio, nearly 6,000 hotels worldwide, over 100 countries. It helps us just also reinforce that we have a brand for every occasion, from the everyday when you're going to down the road, or a road trip to go see your parents that you've been missing out on, to going around the world on that bucket trip list, from Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express all the way, to the Intercontinentals and Six Senses and everything in between. And so we are just celebrating our brands in a way that I think we've been wanting to do and continuing to build for a while now. But this was just a great moment in time for us to reveal ourselves, almost like, we've gone through this transformation and now we're able to kind of change that narrative and bring to life our brands in that way.
So that's a lot to write, a lot to communicate, which is great. I mean, obviously it's not just a simple thing to do a rebrand like this for a historic brand. How will you be communicating this? How do you get the message out? How will you be bringing this to market?
Yeah, it's really going to be something that will be intrinsic in everything that we do. It's not just a campaign launch in a moment in time, but it's a purposeful way that we're going to bring to life everything that I mentioned earlier across our commercial campaigns, across how our brands are going to be stronger together, and how we're bringing to life our loyalty program too, and the critical aspect of how our members engage with us. I heard, I think one of the questions earlier of like, what does loyalty mean outside of this? And loyalty is not about us, but it's about our members. And so coming to life and continuing to build on the great benefits and the program that we already have established, and thinking through how all of that will continue to evolve over the next several months and years to come. So it's a great question. It's not a simple one. Obviously, it's not like we're just coming to market in a moment of time. It will be across everything that we do moving forward. But I will say that I'm truly excited. I'm passionate about how our guests have reacted, how our members have reacted, and how the industry has reacted to just even the way that we're coming to life in this new master brand kind of relaunch period.
We had a question from somebody, so let me ask that, because I think it's right to this point, to this question, which is, and I'm not sure exactly who they mean by the customers here, but let's answer it anyway. Have you had any pushback from customers on the choice to spend money on a new master brand at a time the hotel industry has been so severely impacted by the pandemic?
It is a great question. And so, it's something that we have been very mindful of, not only for cost, for the understanding the rebrand, but also to our owners. And so just to let everyone know that we did all of this internally. And so we were very thoughtful and mindful that we wanted to not bring any additional cost to our owners, or how we're leveraging marketing funds. And so all of this work and creative, will continue to be very thoughtful, so that it's building on the things that we're already doing, not again necessarily creating something that's additional cost. However, now's the best time to also do that, because we are stronger together, we are better together across all of our brands, all of our programs, and across the portfolio and the enterprise of what IHG is doing globally.
Obviously IHG is very different than, say, Dana from American Airlines, where you have owners, right? Not just sort of end customers. I'm curious, with the rebrand, how does it support the owners? And if you could tell us a little bit about that coordination, which might not always be so simple.
Yeah, it's a great question, and our owners are at the heart of everything that we do as well, and they're so critical to keep in mind with any marketing that we're putting together, and how it's driving value to them. And so it's, as we think about the master brand, we're going to continue to keep the uniqueness of our individual brands and our destinations and our hotels to life. This is just showcasing that we're all a family of brands that are very diverse, and that allow us to elevate the way that they're brought to market as well. And so it is critical for us to never lose sight that our number one goal is to drive our owner value.
Okay, I'm going to transition just a second, but it is still on this topic. Forgive me, it's maybe not as important as the entire thing, but let's talk about the logo. Your favorite topic.
Yeah.
The logo has changed. It lost color, or at least it changed colors, let's just say. I'd love to know more about the story behind that, or like maybe what is the intention of what you're looking to portray now with the new logo versus the old one.
The great logo debate. Certainly, you've seen many companies, and even in our industry, that have gone through transformations of their logo. And for us, it was just important as part of this rebrand to cement how we are positioned in the market, that it is very much a refined, look and feel, but it is more about, it's not so much about the logo, but it's about how we're bringing to life, our personality, our purpose, and how we're keeping connections at the heart of everything that we do. And so, we want to be bold in the way that we go to market, and for our new logo and how we're bringing it all to life. It's one that we felt like was a great segue into positioning us into the future and what we're going to be and continue to be known for.
Thank you. And I know we're here to talk about the future and not the past, but there is one more question that I think is interesting before we move on to like the pandemic where we find ourselves today, and then planning for the future. Henry asks, you mentioned Kodak experience. So do you see any dramatic changes in this space as significant as the migration from film to digital photography? What activities do you have to adapt, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, when there's things that are relevant and related from both industries, but at the same time, they're very different. And so, for Kodak, that was an industry in change, and certainly it had to continue to pivot. And where they are today is very different than where they were several years ago. When I look at where we are as an industry and as an organization, is that we have a great opportunity to take this moment in time to reflect on all the great foundational things that we were trying to build and that we were building, and the experiences that we were bringing to life for our guests and our members, and just evolving. The world is going to be different. You've heard that throughout the day. We recognize that travel is going to be somewhat different. And so we have to keep listening. Listening is critical to our owners and to our guests and to our communities. And as long as we're listening, we're going to be able to adapt our experiences. We've launched our new policies. We've adapted our loyalty benefits, and similar to what you heard with Christine, you can go and check on the IHG Rewards page for we've adapted some of those benefits, especially as we're in 2021 as far as tier status and earning structure and all of that. But for us as an industry, the way that we're going to continue to evolve is going to be yet to be seen in some ways. In some ways, we recognize that we've got some new policies and things in place right now that will be with us for the foreseeable future, including the IHG Way of Clean, which was always industry leading and best practices. But now that we've partnered with the Cleveland Clinic and the way that we give everyone the confidence that our hotels are clean and ready to welcome them when they're ready to travel again, to our cancellation policies, to our flexible rates. All of those things are so critical to how we've navigated through the pandemic, and it's going to be critical as we continue to understand what is customer and guest and owner needs moving forward.
Since you mentioned it, I'll follow up on that, which is coming out of the pandemic. I was just wondering if you see brands like Even taking off due to the dedication to health and wellness, and perhaps you can tell us a bit more about the IHG Way of Clean and even Six Senses hotels, resorts, and spas, and the emphasis around health, more than anything else.
Yeah, it's a great question. We already had some brands, and Even Hotels is a great example of that. The identity of that brand and the personal experiences was really centered around healthy travel. And so it started with everything from your exercise routine, whether it was taking advantage of the studio on property, or whether it was exercise equipment in your room, to healthy eating and mindfulness, to even comfortable workspaces, and so that you can kind of be in your zone and feel at your best. And so that is a a brand that I think will continue to grow and to thrive throughout this. And in fact, there are aspects of Even that you can continue to see that will be part of our industry and best practices. And they were just leading the way before the pandemic. And then Six Senses is just all about reconnecting with yourself, your mindfulness, being able to reconnect with the communities, sustainability, and the world around you. Travel is one that helps us feel so connected to our loved ones, but also just the world around us and the new experiences that we all crave to get back out there and to learn and to experience firsthand. And Six Senses is one of those brands that can really just immerse you into the culture and into the environment and into almost back into yourself. One of the great things with, I think, change as well as those brands is we've all been on a personal journey through change, and this is an opportunity for us to also reflect of how have we grown and how are we reconnected with the world around us. And those are some of the brands that will continue to, I think, be relevant and authentic as we come out of this.
I definitely want to get to the diverse portfolio and talk more about some of the brands and collections. But before I do, you mentioned talking about health and wellness and really reconnecting made me think about a recent article where I read and loved the concept of traveling consciously. And I see, IHG is doing a lot, from, points donations to just giving back in general. I'm wondering how that is taking a hold of the company and sort of as a strategic initiative, and is impact, as an investment strategy or as a marketing and as a business strategy come to the table because that's intrinsically part of IHG? Is it also part of like what the future is going to be for IHG?
It absolutely is. I mean, our core purpose is, true hospitality for good. And that is something we pull through everything that we do. And in fact, yesterday we launched our new initiative of, Journey to Tomorrow, which is really all about the future of responsible travel and our commitment to what that actually means, not just in what we're saying, but what we're doing. And it's everything from sustainable travel to diversity and inclusion, and making sure that we are providing a warm welcome to anyone and everyone who wants to stay in any of our hotels, and how we bring that to life in a really authentic and meaningful way. To, even thinking about the different travel, needs of being very thoughtful of how we are providing the best experience for when the family is able to get back together again for the first time, and those moments that matter, right, with our key leisure audiences. And then you have business audiences who are going to be concerned about getting together in big groups and meetings. And so what are those ways that we can put their mind at ease and keep them comfortable? We talked about IHG Way of Clean, but it's also meeting with confidence so that you can feel like you're being taken care of. All of those are really bringing to life the true hospitality for good. And that also plays into what we need to give back to our communities. We talked about our owners earlier, and one of the things that I'm so proud of for our company and our industry, and when you think about hospitality, is we're part of these communities. We have so many of our owners that are, living, as an example, the American dream, and they have one Holiday Inn Express and they put their entire life savings in it. And we want to make sure that we're setting them up for success all the way to, our larger corporate partners, and how we bring to life, our role in the communities is so important to us.
So you mentioned earlier, I just said I was going to get back to it, which I promised I would, and I am. you have an extremely diverse portfolio. I mean, it's 16 brands across 4 collections, if I'm correct. I'm just wondering, with the rebrand, how you see this as an asset coming out of the pandemic. If you see a particular brand taking the lead for you. We talked about a couple already, but maybe there's some that might do a bit better coming out versus others. And or how do you see the 4 collections all working together, harmoniously?
Yeah, it's another great question. And, as we think about our collection of brands from luxury and lifestyle, and we talked about, everything from Six Senses to Intercontinental, and Kempton, is a great example too. Those are the brands that are bringing to life the experiences in a way that help us reflect on, the things that we're looking to get out of travel that are at that, next level. And then our premium brands, and Crowne Plaza is a great example of how we are thinking about the evolution of business travel. And it's not just travel. What's business travel going to look like? How are we going to travel together, and a work-life integration, and some of those workspaces that we had already created, and being able to articulate across our premium brands, and then going into our essentials. We talked about Holiday Inn Express and Holiday Inn, along with our extended stay brands. Our extended stay brands have done phenomenally well, during this time period, because they're, built-in suites and, kitchens, so that you can have a pretty, comfortable stay, and you have everything to meet your needs if you have a long stay as well. And then certainly, and that goes into our suites as well. And when you think about our collection of brands, all of them have, a different role depending on what your stay need is or your travel occasion. So as far as which ones are going to fare better, I think it really depends on which travel segment is, traveling first. In certain areas, we've got luxury segments that are picking up, and certain, when you think about, in China and other places around the world, and you've got more of the essentials and the mainstream, if you will, brands that are traveling in the US right now. And so it will continue to evolve as the pandemic and the crisis, as we all kind of come out of this from a leisure and a business standpoint.
Well, I was going to ask you, which do you see, I will still ask you actually, which do you see taking off first, leisure or business, or what has been the last year looked like, and what do you think the next year is going to look like, maybe is a better way of positioning that. But I also wanted to say, because we spoke about this yesterday, I think it's really interesting that country by country, that may be very different.
Yeah.
Answer. So maybe you could talk about that for a second.
Sure. So as it relates to, over the last year and just moving forward, you've had more leisure segments, certainly in pockets, as this is the uniqueness of what, the world we're living in right now. You've got pockets of leisure that are traveling in the Southeast US, but then you've got leisure and overall markets that are shut down, like the UK is right now. And so you're having to continuously navigate on who's traveling, what are government regulations, and how do you not seem tone deaf in the way that you're sending, marketing offers, or making sure that you're staying true to, the government regulations that are happening. And then as it relates to business, business travel, you've heard that also today, that it is not the same. We do have, certain business segments that are still traveling, that are going to be core to our business. But you can think about you and I, you were talking about this yesterday. You used to be a road warrior, and you were on the road 80% of the time. And now how many times have you traveled this year? And so typical, we have to be very mindful of when that business travel starts back up. And, it's probably going to be slower than certain industries or small and medium, businesses, when they're their livelihood is, I have to get on the road to go make money, versus large corporations who are being a little bit more mindful of some of their employee, just overall protocols. And so everybody's going to come out of this a little bit differently, by markets, by stay need, by business. And so it's difficult to navigate or it can almost be overwhelming when you think about it, but it also helps us to always be ready to react depending on what's happening. And so I use this term, I think we were talking about it yesterday, to be prepared to be unprepared. And so that's the way we're just having to navigate, especially in the short term. I think the critical piece is that we can't lose sight of the long term too. So we can't lose who we are, and again, delivering that true hospitality for good, and the commitments that we made, or how we're bringing our brands to life in the long term, as much as what we're doing to react to the short term.
So the pandemic has become like this great reset. This big reset button has been pushed kind of in the travel industry more than others. So to get back to the rebrand, is this a good time for the rebrand? Does this give you an opportunity to do something and to be out there in a way that you maybe wouldn't have been otherwise? And especially around things like loyalty and driving new customer loyalty versus, ensuring that those customers that were with you previously are coming back and understand they still have those points and can use them and get involved. Is this reset a great opportunity or a bigger challenge?
It's really not about the rebrand as much as it is about how we look at the future. And so it is a new perspective for all of us. And so it's, when you think about anything you're trying to do right now, it's going to be difficult. So you have to be very mindful of, as we talked about earlier, not incurring, costs or certainly doing anything that's going to be disruptive to our owner's business. Everything that we're doing is with how we're having the opportunity to evolve and transform the way that our guests, our members, and just overall are looking at IHG Hotels and Resorts as the butterfly that has come out of this transformation in a way that has been reflective and helping us be ready for the future and be ready for what's to come. And I think that's just a great opportunity for us to keep that in mind. And so it's not about the logo and it's not about the rebrand, but it's about who we are as a company, who we are, for our employees, as well as across all of the, landscape of our guests and our owners.
So in a completely different space, I want to talk about in the weeds a little bit about media.
Yeah.
So with the rebrand, without the rebrand, doesn't matter. You still got to get the message out. You still got to advertise, and you still got to talk to people. So I'm wondering, when things are back in full swing, which obviously no one's back yet full swing, when the investments start flowing back, what channels are you looking at for marketing initiatives? What ones were you looking at pre-pandemic versus now during and post that you're maybe more excited about that you weren't back then because things have changed?
Yeah.
Influencer marketing, social media, publishers, linear television versus CTV. Like, what are you looking at? What are some of the things that are on your mind around sort of media in general?
Can I pick D, all of the above? I mean,
Yeah.
it's when we were started out navigating the pandemic, we had to shut down all of our media, or we had to think through not going out and promoting travel when nobody should be traveling. And so we're excited to continue to pick that back up. And as I talked about earlier, we want to be where our customers are. So influencers play a role, social media plays a role, connected TV plays a role, and being very thoughtful too of when and how we communicate, both in the US but around the globe. And so I would say that each channel is critically important for us, but we also have to be mindful that it is the right thing to do at the right time, not only for our owners, as we talked about, but also for our guests. One of the things that I would say that is going to be a challenge for us as well as everybody else is, what's the balance of the right level of content versus too much content? Choice is something that I think will be hard when you have too many choices. So how do we simplify it in a way that really cuts to the heart of what our guests are looking for, or being able to serve them up the best destinations or the best brands in a thoughtful way versus trying to give them everything all at once. And so that'll be, I think, a challenge for us, but also a great opportunity for us as we think about the role of our channels and our media.
Annie, can I ask one last question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't want to miss a special question from the audience. So Henry followed up to one of our previous question, okay. Which I think is just really great. So will there be an emergence of virtual tourism? And so I'm wondering, I know you may not want to speak to this, it might be under wraps and special R&D labs, but are you as IHG thinking about virtual tourism in any way that you can share with us today?
It's a great question, Henry. I'm telling you, thank you for all the hard questions. I think everything is having to go through the lens of virtual right now. And the great thing that you'll see in market even today are our hotels and our brands already have some virtual tours, not only to give you that sense of wanderlust of where you want to go next, but also for any of us who are sitting in our offices all day long and tired of having the news on in the background, or just having a moment where you can disconnect and think about travel again. You can actually go into some of those videos and immerse yourself into, go to, a Six Senses and go to the Maldives and or Hayman Island and the Intercontinental, all of these places I want to go. And so I think virtually being able to connect with the communities and the experiences there are going to be critical. So I think it's an exciting new landscape that we're all going to figure out as we move ahead.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great way to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both so much for joining us. I feel like there's that common thread of positivity and optimism, and I love your metaphor about the butterfly and transformation, and really seeing this period of time like that. So thank you both so much for joining us today and providing these really great insights. And we hope that you can come back very soon and share with us even more of that optimism and more of that positivity, as we move forward.
No, thank you. And thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. Well, that was an incredible day of speakers, and we're just so excited for our upcoming summits. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us today. We might be doing this again in May, on May 18th. Actually, if you're curious to learn more from our travel experts, so definitely tune into that. And I also want to announce that we do have our inaugural international live cast coming up on Thursday, the 18th, and that'll start at 8 a.m. Eastern. So please tune into that to check out speakers from Anheuser-Busch, Kraft Heinz, Electronic Arts, Merlin Entertainment, and more. Thank you again, everybody, for